This is absolutely amazing. Yeah. It's absolutely amazing to be in this room right now, and I'm so happy you're joining us. Welcome to Penguin Live. Thank you so much for supporting Live Magic. We bring the absolute best magicians and mentalists in the entire world directly to you, but I don't think we're going to get much better. I've actually never been more excited in my entire life to introduce the gentleman that you are going to see right now. Now, because you probably already know so much about him, you know that he has really revolutionized our profession and elevated it to a status that it hasn't had in quite a long time and maybe never had before. I don't have to tell you about all of his accolades. The less I talk, the more we get to hear his wisdom. So please join me in welcoming Derren Brown. Yes, it's really him. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Less clapping, more wisdom.
Well, I've got to be honest with you. You're the most convincing lookalike I've ever met.
I do my best.
Yeah. So Derren, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. This is very exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me and inviting me along. It's very exciting.
It's really an honor for me and for everybody to have this chance to sit down and talk with you. I want to just kind of start off as though you and I are just chatting as friends. Although this is the first time we've had a chance to meet. But I understand that you have a pet parrot, yes?
I do have a pet parrot, yes I do, called Rasputin.
All right,
and very naughty.
How's Rasputin doing?
He's good. He learned a new trick called push the baby. Okay. I teach him tricks. Push the baby involves picking up a little baby chick, putting the baby chick in a pram, pushing the pram to a cot, taking the baby chick out, putting it in a cot, and giving it a little kiss. So, potentially finale to the new show.
It sounds great. It sounds great. Some viewers had written in and wanted to ask questions, specifically about your parrot and the relationship. Mainly, how well does he deal with the stress of your schedule? And it sounds from that like he has no problem at all. Like you have plenty of time.
Well, we talk every night. I always ring up and say good night, ask how the show goes. He stays at home. There's always people in the house. It's quite a busy place, and he's very sociable. So I do go away for quite long stretches, but it never seems to be a
Does he ever learn any words while you're away that you're surprised? You come back?
I try to teach him to say, "Help! I'm trapped inside this parrot," which I thought would be fun, but he couldn't get far beyond just sort of, So he says bye-bye. And he does a very good zip noise. So if you zip something up, he does a very convincing zip noise.
Well, no, I
think we should just keep this
going.
Whoa,
wait, because you have opened up a possibility there. How often does he hear? No, we're not even going to talk about that. Let's get on to the business at hand. One of the first things that a lot of people have noticed about your performances is that your clothing, your grooming, your stature, you may not know this. I don't know how in touch with the magic fans you are, but that gained you a lot of respect. Were you always fashion conscious and always concerned about about portraying a very stylish image?
I don't know. I think actually I sort of way back when it all started, it was very kind of suits, and so I sort of don't now. In fact, the last stage show, quite consciously, I sort of dressed down a bit and kept it quite informal. I think it's one of those just sort of choices that you kind of, because you want to be yourself, but as sort of a tweaked version of yourself. And I think maybe at the start of doing TV, the neatly groomed suit is a bit of a classic mentalism thing, and it's a bit of a first. Not in your case so much, but
no. I do the best. I do the best I can on my limited means.
But yeah, I think now I'm sort of more known. It's actually quite interesting to not do that and make it a bit more sort of yourself. I remember just watching the Richard Dawkins documentaries and just seeing this guy going out in just sort of shirt sleeves, and it actually felt a very kind of honest and open thing, which I quite like. And I think this is quite interesting, trying to be open and honest within a craft or an art form that's based on deception. So I like that. So I've sort of slightly moved away from that highly group thing. And I've lost the goatee, of course.
Yes. Do you think initially that that's important for a performer that isn't recognized to establish some credibility? Because otherwise, somebody comes out. We see a lot of performers nowadays that just come out in jeans and a shirt, and I don't think until you're known that you can get away with that.
Or it's a new thing. But of course, everyone. I think there are so few role models, and or rather, there are. Particularly for women getting into magic, there's even fewer, because who are the great female magicians that you can really sort of look at in the same way that a guy getting into magic? There's probably immediately 10 very different styles of doing magic that can come to mind, or different magicians you can look at and emulate. With mentalism, I think even less so. It's kind of like, will I pretend to be psychic, or will I do a kind of psychological thing, or will I be a comedy mentalist? And that's kind of feels like that's sort of it, which it shouldn't be. There should be as many ways of doing it as there are people doing it,
Right.
But it's, of course, you start off by emulating and copying, and so it's more difficult. I think your dress and everything is part of that, and it's finding who you are and just doing that, but tweaking it and shocking it up.
And when you talk about tweaking it, it's enhancing it, it's creating a bit of a persona, based on yourself.
Yeah, you can overthink it. I remember when I first got the show, I did sit down and think, okay, I need some sort of should I have a limp? Should I have an accent? Should I have like a gold tooth? I mean, literally sat down and thought through all those things. I had a terrible mistake, of course, that would have been.
Yeah.
But it's easy, isn't it, when you overthink, because you want to kind of find whether it's a visual thing or it's so easy to overthink that. But ultimately, what it has to be, if it's going to have any longevity, I think particularly it's important as well, is it has to be you. If there's going to be any. So there's a thing with magic, I think, or mentalism, or whatever, that magicians tend to be, obviously not every magician, but I think there's a typical thing that happens with well-known magicians when they sort of break through on TV, that they're really interesting and cool for a couple of years, and then people sort of get a bit kind of like, all right, they've seen it, or start to feel a bit patronized, or they start to become figures of fun. And I think a lot of that is a kind of a trying too hard, which I think comes from the fact that all the really interesting stuff in magic you can't talk about, because it's the method stuff is where the really interesting, sort of fascinating stuff is. So you can't talk about it. So what magicians that are known, and then they're getting interviewed and so on, and what they tend to do is to create an interesting persona to sort of plug that gap. To sort of, I'll play interesting, which again is interesting. It is interesting for a bit, but then it starts to become, come on, they're just tricks, and and then I think that's why it just starts to appear. It's just posturing, which is why I think Penn and Teller have done such a great job, because their agenda has never been about themselves. It's always about something else, so they never seem to be posturing.
And when somebody's putting on that persona, it's the prestige of having to maintain it off stage as well that can really wear thin, isn't it?
And and I when I started with the mentalism, the sort of claims I was making were quite sort of big, and I did have a velvet. It wasn't velvet, but like a frock suit. And, I used to do velvet frock suit, but on TV it wasn't. But it was all of that, and it's fine for that first initial impact. But I think if you try and sustain that, you just become ridiculous, because it is ridiculous. It's not coming from anywhere.
Yeah, sure. So now that you've grown into yourself, because it's what it sounds like. Do you still perform when you're like out and about with friends, and do any?
I really don't. I reached a point, so I think most of us get into magic because we want to impress people. That's the reason for doing it. And you kind of, it's the quickest, most fraudulent route to impressing people, isn't it? So you're literally, you can hide behind something and have people go, oh, wow, you're amazing, based on this thing you're doing here. So naturally, of course, it appeals to you if you don't feel naturally very impressive. And I think that may be important to you in your teenage years, or to me it was important in my sort of student years. But by the time I was in my mid-30s, I'd sort of grown out of that. So I thought about just leaving it and doing something else. But by that point, the TV had taken off, and it felt that would be silly. So I changed it. I moved it to a different place, and now the TV shows are not really about me going, hey, I can do this, aren't I clever? They're about other people, which for me is a kind of a growing up thing. But as part of that, one thing I have really lost is the desire to show people tricks in real life, which feels terrible. I feel guilty as a...
Do you get asked, though?
Sometimes.
And how do you go about do you ever do it, or do you politely decline, or is there a bit
I
of mix?
politely decline. It depends on the situation, because sometimes people... I remember I was on tour and I was sat outside a restaurant eating out on on the street, on the seats outside, and these kids came up and then, oh, go on, show us a trick. And I was like, well, you know what, it's my afternoon off and I'm just having lunch. And they went into this whole thing, it's all fake, isn't it? You can't do it. Come on, it's your fans, we've got you where you are. And they're quite a bit rude about it.
Yeah, a bit pushing.
And if they are a bit rude, then you kind of don't mind
less,
not,
but, right.
So sometimes people are just, they just really do want to see something, and often journalists will ask. But I find it, I love doing the stage show. I like doing the TV. I don't always love doing the TV, but I love doing it on stage. But it's all about framing, isn't it? So, like, if you're doing something on stage, there's a theatrical framing around that. So the reality you create is in this sort of grey area where you have a lot of license. On TV, it's different. If you say something on TV, like, on stage, I can say, I have memorized all these books word for word, and I think you have a license that's sort of fine to say that if you haven't, if it's a trick. On TV, I think it's different, because you're in people's homes and you're going, oh, I've done this. And they're going, well, you said that on TV, so you've done it. And I think it's different. Yeah. So I don't do that anymore.
They may come up to you with one of those books and say,
Yeah, but it's not just that. It's a sort of a slightly kind of ethical sort of thing that's different, at least for me. You have to steer your way through these things. And in real life, when you're doing it, it's another thing again. And like Andy Nyman is the master at just kind of segueing into some kind of trick. As you'll be chatting, then you're halfway through a trick before you even realise it. It's great, it's lovely, and it's hilarious. But I can't do it. I just find I don't want to, whatever that blurring of truth and stuff is. In real life now, whereas I used to be the guy that had to do it all the time. I couldn't have a normal conversation without showing people tricks. Right. And now I really don't. It makes me uncomfortable now, so I don't. Yeah. I was really rambling. I will ramble a lot.
No, that's fine. Okay. That's fine, because that's why I want you to be here.
No, thank you.
But you have progressed in your career to perform in various venues, from close-up to stage to television and so on. What did you find were the pros and cons of those venues? Different approaches to them. Was there much difference, and how would you sort of encapsulate it?
I think it's all about learning curves, isn't it? So I'd done a lot of close-up before, and then I wrote a couple of books for magicians, Pure Effect and Absolute Magic. So they were out, and that's how I kind of got the TV, really, because I'd had a name amongst magicians. So of course I went into then TV thinking, oh, well, I know everything about magic because of that reputation, and realised I was at the bottom of a very steep learning curve about what actually it is to do it on TV. So you're then in an environment where pacing has to be very different. You have certain kind of opportunities open to you, and you kind of have to. You have to steer your way through how much of that you want to exploit or not. I think that's changed nowadays. Clearly, it's a different world now with TV magic than it was back when I was starting. Mm-hmm. And then again with theatres. I mean, the first theatres I was doing were kind of 400 or 500 seats, and that was a big learning curve. And then a couple of years later, it was sort of 1,000, 2,000, and again, that was another learning curve. And each time, each environment brings new challenges. But that's also the joy of it, because you have to learn how to perform as like an actor on stage, which is very different from just magic technique.
Yeah. Did you have any training at all in acting before?
No. But I did. I worked with Andy quite a bit, and voice coaches and that kind of thing, because you have to learn a whole other set of skills. I remember years ago I did a little TV thing when I was just doing close-up, and on it I was talking to Paul Daniels and asking him questions and advice, and I said to him off camera, what do you think is more difficult, doing close-up or doing stage? Expecting, in all my arrogance as a close-up performer, that he'd say, well, close-up, because it's so much more intricate, and stage, that's just about clever boxes, and and of course he didn't. He said, no, stage is infinitely more difficult. There's no, when you're doing close-up, they're only watching you like this. Mm-hmm. And stage, you've got to think of everything from lighting to direction and blocking, and and that plus every part of you is in view. And I didn't understand it at all at the time. I thought it was ridiculous, right. And of course, very quickly understood that is
Yeah, it truly seems like on stage it has to be about the person because they are really experiencing you completely. Because you said there are some challenges, do you have suggestions for somebody that is starting out like you did, starting out close-up, starting out a little smaller, when they first get their bigger gigs, maybe they're just going into stand-up, you know? What do you think is really important for them to focus on to make that transition? Is it learning some stagecraft, whether it's on their own or from somebody else, or you know, or what other considerations are that they should really think about?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because the key is always understanding, particularly with magic. A thing with magic I always find so interesting is that it all happens, the entire experience is in the heads of the people watching. And it succeeds or fails based on that. You know, you can go to a play and not get it, or it can go over your head. That doesn't mean the play has failed, it just means you haven't got it. Likewise, you can go to a concert and not like the music and, you know, not get it, and you've just missed it, that's fine. But with magic, it's entirely about that experience with that person. But most magicians, certainly me for a long time, your concerns are much more sort of ego-driven. They're more based around what people are going to think of you and what impression you're giving off, and let alone the methods. So there's a wild difference between, you know, we all learn what's good and commercial when you're doing close-up around a table. You know, those considerations, you know, we're all aware of those, but it's less talked about on stage because I guess fewer people do it. And you know, so for me, it's always about you've got people trapped in a room with me, you know, for a few hours. What is that world that they're coming into? What sort of experiences and moods and moments and things do you want to leave those people with? That was always the starting point. So I think it's the same thing, whatever you're doing, but it's difficult to grasp that if your experience is in close-up magic, and then you're doing a stage, or even if it's only for sort of 20 people above a pub or something, it's a world of difference. Because you know, you've had people that are sat there waiting, and before you even walk out and anticipating a show, and if there's only 12 of them in a little room, that's much more exciting potentially than 500 people in a room, so they would start to expect something really special. And if you come out and you're essentially just doing close-up magic, that's immediately very disappointing to start with. You know, having to start off with something that you don't then, and that's not just a trick, but just the opening of what you do, that you're setting a bar at that point. If you start low, it's a real effort to then drag people up to where you want them after that. So those first moments are so important. There's a whole load of considerations that in close-up really it's a very different sort of thing. So I think often it's about, they were always, you know, told not to copy other magicians and be creative, which obviously is important, but at first, of course you have to copy. But it doesn't have to be magicians, you know, there can be comedians or other performers that you love, and you just think, what is it about them that just really works? You know, one thing I really value, I think all the best comedians have it, so I love, like, Louis C.K., but you also see it with George Carlin and Bill Hicks and all the sort of the greats, is the idea of the vulnerable sage, which is how I think of it as. So somebody who is, irrespective of whether it's comedy or what they're doing, the ideas they're getting across are really good, serious, worthwhile ideas, but they're not preaching at you. And the reason why they're not preaching at you is that they deflect it back against themselves, that they undercut themselves, and that's where the comedy comes from. And that mixture of being vulnerable on the one hand, but equally imparting worthwhile stuff on the other, to me is a very potent mix. So that's something I kind of think about when, particularly with the last show, Infamous. That was, and certainly with the new one that I'm starting to think about now, that's a big thing for me. And that'll be different for different people. It might just be, you know, if you like Eddie Izzard or somebody, what is it about him when he comes out that you're just immediately with him? You know, and I see it. I used to go to magic conventions, and often it just works the other way. A magician comes, you can tell the difference between, you know, David Williamson comes out, and within 3 seconds, you're relaxed, you're on his side, and somebody else comes out, and you're just, oh, no, he hasn't said anything, hasn't done a trick yet, you just, you know, so you start to think about, well, what is it, what makes that work and that not work, which is a sort of copying, but I think it's those things. It's certainly isn't about the tricks or the methods, let alone the methods. It's about understanding this is all going to happen in their head. And if there's people in an audience, that's different from people at a table that have been chatting and now I'm just coming in and got to get their attention. So it's how you manage that. And sometimes I think just looking at other performers that you like, but not magicians, so you don't get too distracted by the tricks.
Yeah.
Can be, one way.
And I like that you talked about copying others is basically okay, because you're really talking about emulating them.
Every creative pursuit, you have to do that. Yeah, you have to move away. You can't be doing that forever. But it's a perfectly natural way of starting.
Yeah. Now, during all of your performance career, have you ever run into hecklers? Have you had any difficulty with hecklers at all? And the reason I like to ask this question is because I feel that the better planned and scripted you are, like you are, the less likely that is to happen.
Yeah.
But did it ever come up?
Not really. It's not me. I have specific odd things that happen on stage, like seem to attract slightly kind of unfinished people sometimes who just will suddenly just get very angry, will stand up and just shout and be angry at something, and it's you're clearly looking at sort of forms of mental illness rather than just sort of heckling or people having fun. So I get that, which is odd. Had a really interesting thing in close-up once, where I used to do, I'd maybe go around the tables, but afterwards I'd have my own table and I'd be doing card routines, and people would come and sit with me, and so that was really nice. And I remember one guy there's a trick on. I had a DVD out years ago called The Devil's Picture Book, which I still go back to, and I try and remember those tricks I used to do, because I knew that was it. I sort of wasn't going to do them anymore, really. But there's a card trick involving like 3 people. It's quite a long card trick, and it was fine, and it all worked well. But there was the one guy who was being very polite about it, but just saying, "Look, I'm so sorry. I just don't really understand what." I mean, presumably, I don't know. You had another card, or you've switched it, or you've hidden it. I don't know, but I don't quite understand what I'm supposed to be reacting to. I don't really. And his friends, his friends were like, "What are you talking about? It was great. It disappeared." And he said, "No, I know. Well, presumably it didn't disappear. I'm sorry. I just don't get what. I don't understand. What am I looking at? What is just like no concept, no basic understanding of a trick." And that was really interesting. So I think that's worth listening to, isn't it? There's that sort of thing that's actually quite useful information.
I met one of those guys last night.
Did you?
Yeah, we were just having some fun at the bar, and one of the guys that was with us handed me a deck of cards to do something. It just so happened that 2 4 of clubs came up out of the deck at the same time.
Oh, with 2 different decks, not one deck.
No, one deck.
Bit of a
right,
oh, right.
And it came up in the person's hands, and I took advantage of it.
Right.
But I took advantage of it, saying they're the same. And it took him forever to realize that was a trick.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. It's like he just didn't get it for some reason. Now, out of all of the things that you've done on stage and television, all of the bigger pieces that you've written and put together, do you have a couple of favorites that stand out for you?
Yeah, I do. I think with the TV, my favorites have ended up being. So there came a point, because the TV takes a long time to make. And there's a lot of writing and a lot of pressure that comes in with, you've got to change this or change that, and there's not enough money for that, so we need new idea by tomorrow, So it became important to me to come up with ideas that I knew when I actually came to do them, after all the months of preparation, they'd be really good fun, and I could kind of sit back and just enjoy it, which is why the last few shows, I'm literally sitting back watching monitors and something fun, some big practical joke or whatever is sort of going on. So for kind of personal reasons, a couple of things I've really enjoyed, Hero at 30,000 Feet and Apocalypse, which may not be anybody else's favourite shows, but for me, they were great fun to do, because all the hard work was done by the time we came to do it, which is nice, but also they were genuinely affecting people's lives. In both of them, you've got an unwitting participant who's going through a kind of again, it's a bit like a huge, cruel practical joke, but it's got a real heart to it. There's a good reason for it. And coming out of it genuinely changed, and they're both people I've kept in touch with and know well, and I've sort of made sure that direction has carried on going.
Yeah,
and that means a lot.
They're intricate and involved productions.
Yeah, they're huge and really ambitious and really stressful. Like in Apocalypse, for example. So I presume that you guys know what the basic idea of Apocalypse is.
I hope so, and if you haven't, you must see it.
Have a look it up. But there was one bit in it where this guy, Steve, we needed to make his TV go off, so he sat with his family. Hidden cameras in the house, family all in on this, but just a tiny moment where, it's supposed to be evidence of sort of a meteor shower that's going on and electrical interference. Just want to make his TV go off. So to do that, there's 2 guys in his shed in the garden that having to like pull a cable. So we've run cables out. They've got to pull this thing to make the TV go off. But then they can't just leave because they'll be seen, right? And his bedroom actually looks out over the back garden too, so they can't. So they have to spend the night in his shed. Now these are two guys who haven't had a night off already for like 2 months.
Oh yeah.
And that's for a nothing moment, a tiny moment. So the level of, I mean, it was probably the most stressful thing I've ever done in terms of just like, you know, a crew trying to make something like that happen. But yeah, I think for me, just the fact that because you kind of fall in love with these people when you're going through, put them through something like that. You cannot not feel so emotionally involved with them. So yeah, they meant a lot to me.
Yeah. Now, have you kind of kept in touch and talked with Stephen? When's the last time that you?
I saw him last night. In fact, we see a lot of each other.
Yeah, is he genuinely a better person now?
I think so. Yeah, I really do. I mean, you'd have to ask him that himself, but he said yes, because we do talk about it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was just an incredible experience.
He's teaching now in a special needs school, which is very different from what he was doing before, which was laying on the sofa, drunk.
Right. So obviously, I mean, you know, even in just his actions, it's obvious that he's improved. Like I was saying, there was such an amazing program. That one specifically, because like you said, the transformation, the magic that's being created is immersing this one person in all of these effects, because their whole world is transforming magically, but in a way that they firmly believe in.
Yeah.
And so it changes their world completely.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
You know, gives them a completely different look at it. Now, first of all, how do you go about deciding to do such a thing and thinking that you'll get away with it, you know, right?
Well, there'll be like a 2-week window where there's a chap called Ian Sharkey, those last few shows I've written with, another guy, Stephen Long, who joins us, who a lot of you will know both of those. So we sit around and talk about it. Now, ultimately, it's up to me to kind of drive the ideas, because it's, you know, ultimately going to be my show. But you know, if you do these things on your own, they can become self-indulgent, plus those two guys are brilliant. So we talk about it. They might go away and come back with some ideas, list of ideas. We'll keep talking. But what you're looking for, there's two things I always look for. One is a really simple, dramatic plot that you can sum it up in a sentence, and you would, with TV, you want to watch that. You want to watch that show. And the other part of it is a reason for doing it, a reason that means something. And that'll be just whatever I'm finding interesting and worthwhile at the time, because, you know, it's going to be 8 months before we're actually filming it, so there's a lot of, you've got to really believe in the reasons for doing it. So making somebody believe it's the end of the world, and then waking up in a post-apocalyptic...
That's summing it up in one sentence.
Yeah,
you got to make somebody believe it's the end of the world.
So then you go, right, well, that's great. I'm sure we won't be able to do it, so you talk to your production team, or I have an executive producer that I work with on the show, and hopefully they go, that's amazing, let's try and make it work. And you talk to the channel, and they get excited about it. And then
did it go that smoothly for you?
It did. I mean, the question is then, how much will it compromise? The only compromise at all that was made was my original image of it was it would happen in, you know, suburbia, and it had to, in the end, be in a contained sort of military space, because there's the only way you can control the environment, of course. But that's, you know, that's a given. That's going to have to happen. So no, it absolutely was what we intended to do. So that's really what it is. It's coming up with a particular sort of idea, and then you just have a brilliant production team that actually try and make that into a reality.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable that it was possible to do. That's what I was talking about in your introduction. How you've really elevated beyond anything that any other magician has achieved on television, because you're now orchestrating. You know,
yeah, well, it's not really even magic anymore. I mean, magic. The magic performance has sort of moved on to stage, which I think is much more sort of natural home for it. Magic on TV, you know, and you see it a lot nowadays. You can kind of just sort of do anything. So I kind of, and again, I said I've grown out of that thing of just wanting to go, hey, look, I can do this. Ultimately, I think what it's about for me is, and Teller talks about this, and it's a really, really interesting and important point, is that the trouble with magic is that it's very bad drama. So if you can click your fingers and make something happen, that's a whimsical, godlike ability, and there's no drama in that. What we relate to dramatically is a hero struggling with something, going through a journey where he's setting out trying to do something, and things happen along the way, and maybe he ends up in a slightly different place than he was heading towards. So it's classic Aristotelian drama.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff can't not be engaging, whereas magic sort of doesn't normally have any of that. And good magicians, Tommy Wonder and Teller and others, will talk about ways of bringing that into it. And one thing I've tried to do now with those last shows is to make it, they're real dramas. They're about people. So if it's about me, it's not that interesting. It really isn't. I mean, it might be at the beginning when I'm first on TV 10 years ago, because it's maybe a new guy doing something new, and that's fun for a bit. But you're going to get sick of that. So now it's about real people. Like the last show I did was quite a quiet show, but it was elderly people stealing a painting from a gallery. Yeah. Whether it's that or the apocalypse, the key is it's just people, heroes going through a journey. And then I'm just behind the scenes and pulling the strings, and I'm kind of using sort of magic skills in one form or another somehow into that, or my kind of hypnosis-y psychological skills into it. Interestingly, the bit that tends to alienate people is when I will step in and hypnotise or something like that. Mm. If anything, that's when people go, nah, don't believe it, because how can you do that? Which is really interesting. That's like the bit that's my kind of skill base is sort of less interesting. So yeah, it's just bringing it back to drama, which I think that's all really I've done.
Now, of course, in such a situation like that, with the art heist or with Apocalypse or something like that, you're really not just blurring the lines between what is legal and permissible, you're going way over them. And I think intentionally, because that is very dramatic. Yeah. You must have built-in contingencies if the whole thing goes wrong, right?
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, they're very carefully done. I mean, there's your sort of health and safety stuff, and there's also just the duty of care that you've got to someone taking part. So in something like Apocalypse, for example, in terms of we sort of mention these in the show because it's important to kind of let people understand that kind of stuff goes on. But, so psychologically, for example, so how you look after someone like that. So I'll put out a tweet, or there'll be some sort of ad for people if they want to take part. And a few thousand people that respond. We pick out 500 that say, roughly, we kind of think, they sort of fit the bill, or they, roughly the same kind of right sort of age or whatever. And we get them into town, and they all sign a release form there and then, because we're going to do bits of filming and interviews with them in the room, and now we've got the release form signed, which we need. And
your release form must just read, you're signing your entire...
Signing your life away, yeah.
It must.
But basically, it's fairly standard, actually, but it will say that we can do secret filming with you and so on. And now from that, we kind of narrow down to a few people that we like, and often we might tell them, sorry, we're not going to use you, but thank you for applying, but we've got their release form. So they have to then go through a sort of psychiatric evaluation. So we have a psychiatrist who's part of the team. He knows what the show is. He'll interview those people to evaluate and make sure that they're going to be okay for the content of the show. Mm-hmm. Because if you witnessed, a parent dying in a car crash, for example, we don't want to put them through something involving a car crash. So they don't know what the show is. They think everybody's having the psychological evaluation, but nonetheless they go through that. So that's just sort of starting point. We have somebody who we feel is now robust enough. And then like in a show like Apocalypse, it's things like, okay, so he can't just pick up a pipe and start whacking the zombies around the head, right? Because they're actors. So you create... First of all, we just took everything away. There was physically nothing for him to pick up and do that with whenever there were zombies around. And you create the story that, the last thing he's going to do is go up and start hitting them because he could get blood on him or they could touch him. So, of course, So there's a lot of that goes on. There's people standing by constantly that can step in. I can always step in because I know he's very suggestible. So if he was to sort of totally freak out, I could step in and sort that out. What else? I mean, there's just... a lot of... Oh, yes, and also the actual plotting of the story had to be done so that he's looking for his family, but you could only keep that for so long. Like, he had to find out that his family were alive early enough so that the stress of that possibility that they were dead, for example, wouldn't last too long. That you had to have a safe place. And I think there was even something about like having his iPod with his music on it or something that he could have access to. There was something like, things like that the place he was in, right? That the things would feel comfortable. So all that stuff, which you can't explain in a show because there's just too much of it, has to be in place too. So there's a lot that goes. So it's actually very, very painstaking.
Yeah. Now we've talked about the good and the great and all of that. Have there been anything, either on television or on stage that you weren't quite satisfied with? Not necessarily the worst, but it just didn't quite go as planned, or didn't. Maybe it went into the stage show and just didn't make it to the final production or something.
There's been things in the stage show that come and go, but that's the nature of it. You have previews and things don't work and you take them out. TV-wise, I think the only thing I was never really entirely happy with was I did this lottery prediction, and it was in two parts. There was the show, the prediction itself, which went out. It was a live thing on a Wednesday night, I think, and that was fine. And then there was a reveal show showing how I did it. And that was interesting and frustrating, because when we wrote the show and the idea of predicting the lottery, we were just coming up with 4 ideas for a new series, and you just sort of imagined the regular fans would watch the show and the people that sort of get me and get the show. By the time it came out, it had been really hyped as this guy is going to predict the lottery, which brings with it a totally different pressure and a slightly kind of tongue-in-cheek, well, of course I'm not really going to do that, with suddenly an uncomfortable thing with people, because I get letters from people saying, can you please predict the lottery numbers? It's horrible, tragic, I'm awful stories from people that, and it's a serious thing. So the thing went out, the Wednesday night was the prediction itself. Thursday night we were filming the show and it finished on the Wednesday with me saying, tune in on Friday, I'll tell you how I did it. Thursday we filmed the show of Here's How I Did It, which then goes out on the Friday. And the idea was you'd watch the show, the whole kind of show of how it worked, and there'd be this really kind of fishy explanation, this wisdom of crowds idea that, and a really good trick, I have to say, of a bunch of people in a room, and they start estimating, guesswork at first, what the next numbers will be. Here's all the numbers for the last month. Look at it. Let's just guess what we think the next numbers are, but we'll take the average mean of everyone in the room. And the first time they do it, there's no kind of real results. And then they were coming back week after week or twice a week to do this with each new lottery. And we tried different techniques. They start to do it unconsciously, and in the end they're doing it through automatic writing, and they're starting to get it right. The results are getting better and better. So that in itself was great and entirely convincing for them. So that was the fishy explanation. You're supposed to watch it going, really? I don't know how you're doing that, but is that really? And then at the end there'd be this kind of twist where I'd say, well, you can believe that if you like, or maybe I just fixed it. But if I did fix it, we might have known months ago what the numbers were. It wasn't about predicting the numbers. It would have just been me knowing the numbers up front and then making the machine come out with those numbers. And then we had this final package that was going to end the show, which was really convincing proof that I knew those numbers way before, and here's how I fixed it. But there'd been such fuss about it on the Wednesday and the Thursday. There were questions in Parliament about it, because the lottery is Camelot, which is BBC, which is taxpayers, which is, that it was something like, we can't...
You're messing with money.
Exactly. I can't now put out this show going, I fixed the lottery. It's become like a really serious thing. So we filmed it all, and for those people that were there at the kind of recording on the Thursday night, they saw this real finish to the show. And then I just had, on the Friday morning, they're putting this all together, doing the very quick just edit of that show so we can get it to Channel 4, and I just said, look, we've got to pull that out. We've got to take that ending out. This could be awful. I don't know where this is going to go. Mm-hmm. So we pulled it out. There was a little nod at the end of the show towards the idea that I'd fix it, but basically it just felt like I was selling this idea that it was just this wisdom of crowds thing, which I was never happy with, because that was always supposed to be fishy. And of course people watched it and went, oh, it's a bit patronising if you think we're supposed to believe that. And of course they weren't supposed to really believe that. Yeah. So it's the only thing I've done that I wasn't really happy with, but it's all right. And actually it's one of those things that if it gets people talking and all the rest of it, that's fine. It got a lot of publicity, but I'm not thin-skinned enough just to I'm not very good with that thing of all publicity is good publicity. It's still 3 a.m. I'll be like, no, it's not right. Because I still don't know what's the right decision. Should I put it in and then dealt with the whole kind of, you faked the lottery? This is a huge thing. You're really answerable to that now. And then having to defend kind of that as I don't know. So I still don't know.
Well, it still went over great, but it just, it's one of those things where your vision was much bigger and more interesting, and just couldn't be, absorbed the way that it.
That's a nice way of seeing it. That's how I'll see it now. Thank you. Yeah. My vision was too interesting. Yeah.
There you go. I'm happy to say that.
Excellent.
Because I thought it was. I thought it was absolutely fascinating, and it's more interesting to hear what couldn't make it in, and the reasons to me, because I knew you're. All the time you've been doing things. You've always wanted to just take it as far as possible, to really get that impact on it. Now, a lot of your, maybe even all of the material that's been recorded of you, it has gone viral. People watch it all over the world. It's not always, released material. Somehow it gets out there. Do you think that was also important to your success? Was that a worldwide audience was exposed to what you were doing, even before you had ever traveled to see them?
I guess so. I genuinely never thought of that side of it much. That to me is all things for the grown-ups to talk about, the production team and my management and all of that. I've never, and it always sounds like a sort of false modesty, but genuinely is, I'd never, no particular desire to be on TV other than when I was offered it, when that was exciting, but likewise now it's not like, I've got to do America or do Vegas or anything like that. I think it's important in life, I think, not to fixate on future goals. We're fed all the time that that's a sort of route to happiness, and it's not. It's just a route to not actually living your life in the present. So for me it was always about, is what I'm doing at the moment fun and enjoyable? This is how I want to live my life. So that's all it's ever been. So things have gone viral and been popular, and that's nice, and it makes sense that that's how other shows get commissioned. If more people know about you, the more people watch it, and the more likely a broadcaster is to commission the next show. But it honestly wouldn't bother me at all if 6 people were watching it. It's not even in the end often about the finished product for me. I just sort of think, well, am I enjoying, is this an enjoyable thing for me to be doing in my life at the moment? And it sort of ends there, because the rest of it you can't control. You can't control whether people watch it or like it or what they think of it or whether they think it's real or not. There's only so much you can do to kind of do that. It's a thing in life, isn't it? There's stuff you're in control of, which is your thoughts and your actions, and the rest of it is life and other stuff, and that's nothing to do with you. And you have to sort of let that go. And I think particularly as you think about, success and stuff, it's very important to distinguish between what you're in control of and what you're not. My manager said, I'm sort of not really answering your question now, but my manager said ages ago that the definition of success is, or the formula for success is talent plus energy. Because you can have all the talent, but if you don't, if you're just in your room practicing, that's not going to get you anywhere. Mm-hmm. And likewise, you can have all the self-promotional skills, but if you don't have the talent to back it up, it's no good either. Sure. And a star, he said, is success plus attitude, which I thought was really interesting. What separates a star from just a successful performer is the idea of attitude. Which is true. If you think of any star, whether it's an actor or a magician or whatever, or a musician or a rock and roll star, they've got a real attitude to them. But again, even with that, so if you take success, you're partly in control of some things and not in control of others. But people often just fixate on the idea of being successful or rich or famous, whatever, as if that's a goal that you can aim towards. Mm-hmm. But it's misjudged, because you never get there. It's not like nobody ever goes, right, brilliant, okay, I'm successful now, so I'll stop wanting that, because you don't. It just consistently moves further and further away. And that's how you become mad, right? That's why a lot of people do. What you can control is your thoughts and your actions, what you're in charge of. Then it's like a game of tennis. So if you play a game of tennis thinking, I will win this game, I must win this game, that's my aim, then you can become anxious and frustrated if the other player's better than you, and you start to lose. And that can also then feed into your game, because that stress feeds into it, and then you don't play as well. If you go in thinking, I will play this game as well as I can, that's the bit that's the bit you're in control of. And if the other player's better than you, then so be it. That's the rest of the world throwing stuff back at you. But you're not a failure because you've just you don't have to feel like a failure because you've just focused on the bit you're in control of. So being able to distinguish those things are very important, particularly I think for performers, particularly with magic when it's so much about ego, so much about being better than the other guy, or we're so ungenerous with other magicians all the time. What do you think of so and so, or so and so's series on TV, or it's just, it seems there's something hardwired in us. It's difficult for us to go, yeah, they're brilliant, aren't they? I have no idea how he does it. It's amazing. And that's good for us all to just, be positive about it, and we don't do it. So
no,
it's difficult.
And that's the thing. You had quite a few detractors.
Who? What? What are we talking about?
Well, it's not coming from my direction.
Yeah.
I got to tell you that. But I heard the rumblings, and I'm sure that you were aware of some of the rumblings, and that's the thing. You sort of just like you said, you have to focus on what you're good at and want to do.
You don't do anything good if you can't listen to the good stuff and you can't listen to the bad stuff too much. You have to learn what's important feedback and what's just, particularly nowadays with Twitter and social media, because it's one thing to not read reviews, or it's one thing to know that 20% of people won't like it, whatever, that's fine. But of course, those 20% in social media tend to be more vocally active, and when they write, I'm sure you will. We'll get it as performers. When you read that stuff that people write on this on Twitter and so on, and it's not nice. And it feels bad, and that's the stuff that sticks with you. Obviously, you ignore the 100 lovely things you just read, and you only remember the one nasty thing. It's because it's like reading people's diaries. I think when people write that stuff, because they're not thinking anyone's really going to read it. Not really. It's like they're writing in a diary. And if you read someone's diary, you'd feel terrible. You might do it, but you'd feel terrible. Or if you overheard friends talking about you or people talking about behind your back, you'd feel terrible. So something in you would be saying, "Oh, we shouldn't be doing this." Whereas with Twitter, we just go through it as if that's a normal thing, and we should be reading it. And of course we shouldn't. So we haven't quite caught up, I think, with that. So yes, it's a strange world nowadays with that kind of feedback.
Absolutely is. Now, you said you don't really have any plans to tour in the U.S., but we would love to have you over there. If something like that came up, would it be a consideration?
Yeah, hopefully we'll be doing Broadway in a couple of years. So I say probably off Broadway, but 2017. That's a sort of vague pipeline thing. So I've got to do a new show here for a couple of years. Okay. And then it's like, do I do another show here, or do we maybe go to Broadway? So
have you decided to stop television or cut back on TV, or
I'm cutting down a bit. Yeah. I think I don't need to, because for me it's all about the stage show. Really, and if you look at most magicians, they'll do just enough TV magicians that are on TV and doing stage shows. They'll do just enough to support the stage show. That's kind of for me is what I love most. So that's sort of the plan.
Do you have any kind of anticipation of how you might go over with American audiences? I think Broadway is a perfect fit. Off Broadway,
I think so. Better than Vegas, I think, for me. Yeah. I don't know. I think I'll probably take bits from all the shows that I've done and put together a show for first-time people that won't have seen me before. Yeah. But won't have to necessarily write a whole new show because I've got 6-7 shows I can pull all the best bits from. So it'll be like a best-of kind of thing. Yeah. So I think it'll be lovely. And probably smaller audiences. There's with Broadway and off-Broadway, the difference actually is the size of the audience. I think it's either 400 or 499. It's like if you're under that, you're off-Broadway. Over that is Broadway. So it'll be probably off-Broadway because it's it's a cheaper and easier way of doing it. So it'll be small audiences, which will be a much more intimate thing, which I'm really looking forward to. That'll be lovely. And I get to live in New York for a bit, which will be lovely.
Oh, that will be terrific. I'm definitely going to be first in line. I hope.
No, I love it. I mean, it may not happen. Now, it has come up a few times and not quite fallen into place, but hopefully.
Now, as far as like getting publicity, if you do like a big stunt, something like that. Some of the viewers want to know how would you go about making sure that you get as much good press as possible for any of the bigger things. Did you invite the press out to the lottery live broadcast, or to try to get people specifically, or any of those kinds of things?
The reality is Channel 4 will have a marketing team. Mm-hmm. I'll have my own PR guy. Mm-hmm. Objective that made those shows will also have their own PR people. So there's a machinery in place that makes sure that that all happens. And a lot of that tends to be mostly driven by the channel because they'll have a budget. So they may decide, like with the lottery, we're going to make this really big. And for something else, they might be focusing on something else, and it just sort of comes out like any other show. So I don't really have to, thank God, deal with any of that. Yeah. It's not really my kind of thing.
And this is just whether you think it's practical or not for somebody on a smaller scale that's starting out to create some publicity for themselves with a stunt of some kind, and especially now that they have access to media that can go worldwide, nationwide, however far they want it to go. Do you think that the kind of bigger stunt or publicity stunt is a good thing for somebody to do, especially when they're not recognized yet? Is that the
it's talent and energy. It's the same thing, isn't it? It really is a very simple formula, but it's very true. You can publicize yourself as much as you like, but if ultimately the stunt is a bit embarrassing and not very good, then you're going to call yourself problems. You're going to create problems for yourself because now you've got to try and claw that credibility back again. So you have to develop your talent as well as developing the energy, in inverted commas, as in how much you get it out there.
And let's talk about that for a while, because it's a piece that a lot of working magicians don't quite get if they haven't had to go into larger venues or that. The amount of energy that it takes, because the amount of offstage work that there is a lot larger than they might realize.
In terms of...
Can you talk about the time that's invested in putting together a stage show and...
it is a common thing nowadays, because when I started doing magic on stage, I think, and this may be wrong, someone will have to forgive me if I am wrong, but I think it was really only Paul Daniels in this country that had done a kind of sort of theatre tours and theatre shows with magic of any kind of substance and size. And now, maybe because I've done a lot of shows on stage, and that's kind of set a precedent and put the idea out there. There's a lot of magicians that are now sort of booking small theatres, which is fantastic and exciting. But yeah, it's whether you're ready for that is another thing, and it's it's tricky because how do you promote that, and how social media is great, but of course it might mean you can reach thousands of people, but also there's thousands of other people doing that and reaching thousands of other people. So it's. But again, you work with other people. I think the worst thing you can do is just, which is exactly what I would have been doing if it hadn't been for suddenly working with teams, is just think you've got it, you know it. Don't need to work with the director because they don't understand magic. I got it, I know everything, I'll book a theatre and go out and do my show. And there are plenty of really high-end magicians and mentalists that still make that mistake, and it's just the shows just aren't very good. They think they're brilliant, you can tell, but they're just not that good, let alone people that are starting out. So I think it's understanding the limitations of your knowledge and working with other people, working with the director, and working with somebody who's experienced at putting on shows and knows about all that kind of publicity stuff. Otherwise, you might just be sat there and there's no one there. But Ollie Mealing is here, is a good friend of mine, who started doing shows above a pub, and they were literally just sort of 12 seats. And that was a very natural and wise way of going forward from doing essentially brilliant close-up to kind of, how can I know? Set myself the challenge of doing this for an audience now, but of course it would be silly to, I'll book a theatre for 200-300 people, and A, maybe not be ready for that, and B, maybe only 6 people will turn up. Yeah. So why not do it for 12 people? That's a really interesting idea. And it creates a very interesting space that's perfect for that sort of magic. So,
absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the actual work that does go into it. Can you talk briefly about how someone, not necessarily yourself, because I don't view what you're doing as quite a mixture of magic and mentalism, or do you view it as a mixture of both? I don't worry too much about what it is.
And
how the delineation is. But how does somebody go about mixing those things together so that it doesn't come off as just a bunch of clever tricks,
I really think it's all about committing to the material and committing to the... I think if I brought anything to mentalism, I don't think I brought much to it. I think the choices I made were fairly traditional, really. But I think if there's one thing I did bring, it was the idea of committing to the process of what you're doing. So I've always felt that, and the reason why I never really liked mentalism before, was that mentalism was about going, ta-da, I've written down the thing you're thinking of, and that was the moment of magic. That was the kind of the thing. And it's like, well, it's not, is it? Not with mentalism. That might be the moment of, if you're doing a magic trick, of course, you produce the card and that's the thing. That's the trick. But with mentalism, even if you got that wrong, the interesting thing is, what were you even doing in your head that you thought you were going to get that right? What are you doing with that person that you can read their mind? Okay, you got it wrong, never mind. But what were you doing? It's not about that. It's about the bit that happens before that. So I just took that bit really seriously and really committed to that. So regardless of whether you're doing cards or whatever, it's just really understanding the commitment to what you say you're doing and how you're doing it, and then you can decide whether a certain trick fits you or not. But there are also ways, like with my stage shows, so I really wanted to do this thing I did called the Oracle Act, where it's like a Q&A act. So I was doing that kind of very direct psychic effects with people in the audience. But that's very direct psychic stuff, which I don't really do. So how would you incorporate that? And rather than just going, well, that doesn't really fit me, you find a framing for it. And the framing I often use is this is what they would do. This is what the fraudulent psychics would have done. This is what those Victorian charlatans would do, and I'll recreate it for you now. And just with that little bit of framing, you can do it and totally commit to it and do it as convincingly as you can, but you're also not sort of overstepping some sort of mark that's then confusing, or let alone sort of ethically questionable, because you are going, it's fake, but I'm gonna do it. So again, it's just finding a way of it making sense, and I think that's all it is. It's just
I think you did bring up another interesting point there. That in magic specifically, there seems to be an emphasis on the props and how interesting the props are, and look at this, and then displaying a prop, and very often, and especially with your work, a mentalist tries to take the attention away from the props, especially when they are used, for gaining information, and why should an envelope be interesting anyway, and that kind of stuff. A folded slip of paper shouldn't mean anything. So that seems to be a difference too. But you, as the show has grown, you incorporate a lot of props, theatrically. So how do you balance the two? What do you think? A good mixture is interesting props, interesting themes, and.
Well, I think there's one issue there, which is if you're doing a stage show, you have to have, and it's a big thing, and again, I think a lot of things that people miss if they're coming from close-up, because with close-up, you're with people for, a few minutes and you move on. With the stage show, you need light and shade. The pacing of your show and the levels of interest, they have to has to be continually interesting, which means you need surprises, because entertainment is about surprising, and you need light and shade. So, if you've done 3 routines that are just you standing there just doing a kind of very direct sort of mind reading, you probably do want to introduce something else to look at, because they've just been looking at you for, and if you're not that interesting, or your voice is a bit funny, or you're not dressed very well, or whatever, then that level of interest, that's gonna wear off pretty quickly. So yeah, again, I don't think there's no answer. It's not like, well, I would go, 25% props and 75% no props. It's like in one of the stage shows, I did a thing with essentially a nest of boxes, and it was a sort of coin and a ball of wool was the trick. It's a very traditional magic trick, but it wasn't about that. It actually was sort of a thing about death and memory, and so it sort of doesn't really matter. And props can be really interesting. I still sort of buy little magic props. I also like the idea of sort of that box that's sort of placed down, and that thing. It's very kind of Eugene Burger-y kind of area of that thing being interesting, and that can be really interesting. It doesn't matter. A deck of cards can be perfectly interesting. It's just about commitment to it, and because then ultimately what's interesting is the humanity of it. It's about whether you create something that's genuine drama, as opposed to just that whimsical, I click my fingers and something happens. So genuine drama and kind of human interest, and you can create that with a nest of boxes in the same way you can create it with a Q&A act. I don't think it really matters.
I think it's where to place the emphasis, and know what to take the emphasis off of.
Sure.
Seems like that. Now you've really inspired and sparked the imagination of a whole new generation of mentalists. Many of them are in attendance here. And how do you feel about what we would term the emerging artists, the ones that were inspired by your published books and published works, and then have gone off, on their own paths, and are now carving out their own niche in this world of magic and mentalism?
What do I feel about them?
Yeah, how do you feel about that? Are you aware?
Lovely,
that you've
very nice.
inspired them? Have they told you that? You know.
Oh yeah, no, I do. Yeah, people do often say that. I think it's probably less so now. I imagine I'm probably less interesting to people at the age of getting into magic. It's weird to think, and no disrespect to David, but most young people getting into magic never heard of David Blaine. In this country now, not really. I mean, he's not the sort of current figure. In fact, Dynamo is sort of a return to that kind of Blaine-like world, and people associate that with him, not Blaine. So it's amazing how quickly things move on. So I don't really imagine it happens much nowadays. But I think there was probably a point. A lot of people were growing goatees and sort of calling themselves psychological illusionists and a blend of this and that. There was some variation of that. And very flattering. It's very nice.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Yeah. And at the time that was happening, was there, was it flattering, or was there a tinge of, get away from my material and my look?
Oh, I'd be insincere if there weren't twinges of that. I mean, you can put, we put so much. I remember a couple of little things like there's a trick of which coin is the hand in, and that was weeks and weeks of really sweat and thought, working, a group of us talking, because you try and come up with really simple plots is so important. They're priceless. If you can find something that feels like a game you've always played, or a kind of, you get it, which hand's the coin in, it just feels like a really simple idea. But it takes a long time to get there. So coming up with that for a show, and then within a month, there are props available, you can do it, and it's just like the classic of mentalism, which, like it's been around forever. So sometimes, let alone, when you see people doing a routine, and they've just taken your script, which again, you've put a lot of thought into that. So of course, sometimes it can be a little bit galling when you know the work that's gone into it, but that's, that's inevitable and kind of weirdly flattering, and, we all do it. When I started out doing hypnosis, I saw a guy's show called Martin Taylor, and I wanted to be a hypnotist, having seen it, and I basically did his act. I didn't know you weren't supposed to do that, and, I quickly learned and stopped, but, we're all guilty of that kind of stuff, so, it's fine, and ultimately it's, it's nice.
And because of Martin Taylor, because of his inspiring you, connecting with you, capturing your imagination, and because of you wanting to copy and emulate him, that got you to here, because you grew out of it or learned to do it your own way and that kind of stuff. So, if it hadn't been for that moment, we wouldn't have the pleasure of what you've brought to all of us. So in a way, and we spoke briefly about it before, in a way, it's good that people have copied you, but now they've got to make their own way. Yeah, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, if somebody just copies you and doesn't move on from that, and, but it's fine. It doesn't matter. It's tricks. It's magic tricks. It's fine.
Now it does seem though that the landscape of magic has changed. That there are more young people who are interested in mentalism. But if we go back to Corinda's 13 steps, there's a discussion with Fogel in there where he says that a young person should never do mentalism because they don't have the believability. What are your thoughts on that?
I remember seeing a 13-year-old magician at the Magic Circle do a set. I was there to collect an award, and there was a show going on, and this guy came out and did a brilliant act. It was fantastic, but it was it was like not adult as in a blue act, but it was it was a grown up. That was weird. It was a grown up act.
I think you've just given me a great idea. I got to find
a
good young magician and teach him my act.
You could pull that off. You could certainly pull that off. No, but it was it was a grown up. It was a mini adult doing a grown up magic, classic, slightly old fashioned kind of act, and. Now, you'd never know it at 13 because you're 13. I'm saying 13, he was around then. But actually, being 13 is an interesting starting point for a magic persona, a character, and an act. For us all as adults, watching somebody who's 13 sort of presenting things from the kind of the world and insecurities of a 13-year-old would be absolutely fascinating and rich and different, and and I kind of thought, well, it's a bit of a shame, and it's a bit of a shame because no one's ever going to tell him that. He might realise that when he's older, but no one's saying it now because it's just it's a good.
Did you ever see any of Mark Sischer's act? Does Mark Sischer sound familiar? And honestly, I think he was a little bit before your time, and he did that, you know.
Right,
He,
okay, yeah.
he had the insecurities that came with his age. He was maybe 14 or 15.
Yes, absolutely. So it really is about, again, it's just that thing of being yourself, but a tweaked version of it. So there's no reason at all why not be, you know, if you skateboard and that's you're a skateboardy kind of type, then do a mentalism act that's coming from there. Don't pretend to be. Don't, you know, the worst thing you want to be is 16 and, you know, in a suit and desperately trying to grow a bit of a goatee and sort of being trying to be a master mesmer. But of course, back in those times, that kind of was the only image of mentalism. And I think hopefully now it is, you know, breathing a bit more and likewise it is very young. I remember a magician, a female magician friend of mine who went to a magic shop and said, "Look, have you got anything, any props for me as a woman performing magic?" And he said, "Well, there's a Himba wallet, you could put a flower sticker on it." So that was, you know, so it's nice. Yeah, so again, you know, that's, I think, quite aside from if, you know, you're a young guy, but what if, you know, what if you're a girl getting into it?
A pink ball vase.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But, yeah, literally, gentleman's wallet with a flower.
It's crazy.
So yes, it's about, and it, you know, it helps to have more role models, and which is why I said I think it's very exciting for girls and young women getting into, or older women getting into magic now, that they are the first set of role models. Magic's a very misogynistic world. You know, the only women traditionally in magic are being mutilated on stage, and these kind of weirdly over-sexualized kind of creatures that's nothing to do with being a woman really at all, only for a sort of male audience. And there's historical reasons why that exists. But, it, you know, so if you are now... I mean, it's difficult enough being a woman as a comedian. There are sort of issues there about how you're sort of placed sexually with the audience and not being a threat, not being too pretty, all sorts of weird things that I know they have to think about because I like to talk about this stuff with performers. But, and, you know, another set of challenges for women as to how you, you know, are you just sort of still playing that assistant role, or are you, you know, what is that? And so I think it's always the same thing, isn't it? It's just being yourself and just doing that well and committing to it. But if you're not in the kind of classic, you know, kind of guy magician of a certain age and genital group, then how do you find those things? You just have to, it'll just take those first people to do it.
Yeah, sure. Now, because you've influenced, you know, this new generation, can you think back to when you were first getting interested? Who was influential for you?
First thing I remember was Eugene Berger at a convention. We were at, I think, the International Magic Convention years ago, and it was one of the first. We were just sat at a table. And he goes, "I want you to think of a car and remember what it is." And there was such a kind of, sort of, it was, I'm being silly, but it was genuinely kind of special. You know, he created kind of like a sort of a thing that made it important. And suddenly it was just about us in this little kind of space. And so there was that, and a couple of moments I remember seeing Tommy Wonder do his the cups and balls, but his stage version where the birdcage ends up floating. That was my first kind of gasp moment, and this is, you know, I'm 20-something, not a kid. Right. Something that and gasp. I've had that since, particularly with Teller, with the Miser's Dream that he does, the Silverfish, I think the routine's called, when he produces coins and there's just this fish tank of water. First coin he produced, I saw the show in the Rio in Vegas, just was there with Andy, and we both just gasped. And those are lovely. So moments like that. So Chan Canasta as well, perhaps that probably came a little bit later by the time I discovered him, but you just have those little things that you go, that's what it's about, and that things that just feel special and surprising, and you realise that what's made that work, you know, Eugene doing that we weren't even into the trick really, it was just about knowing how to create a kind of a space around something. So that became very important to me. And then trying to do that in a close-up situation when you're just going around tables brought a load of challenges, and that kind of led to the sort of books I wrote for magicians, I guess, as to how you might still try and preserve that within a kind of, you know, commercial sort of, and, you know, high-pressure, sort of noisy kind of sort of environment.
Did you read a lot of books at that time, magic books specifically?
Not a huge amount. I mean, I think actually when I think of the most interesting magicians immediately come to mind, especially with cards, because that's, so Leonard and Guy Hollingworth, just in terms of like people I know that come to mind are really interesting. What's often brings those people together is that they develop their stuff in isolation. So, and I was doing that too. The love of being a magician for me, I was only doing a gig like every week or a couple of weeks, was going off on long walks and just thinking about tricks and then going and trying them out when I had a gig. So I think actually that's quite handy, not saturating yourself. I mean, I had all the classics, of course, and I did read them. It's not like I didn't read, but I think there's a lot to be said for really kind of developing your stuff in isolation.
Yeah.
So I've never been like a member of a magic club or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, are you currently working on a book?
I am writing a book. I'm writing a book at the moment on happiness.
That's right, yeah, because it's outside of the realm of specifically a magic book. You've also gone on to be an author for the general public.
Sure, yeah.
So you're writing a book on happiness. Do you have any, estimates of when that's going to be?
Maybe, I don't really know. Probably end of 2015. I think end of next year in terms of when it'll be out. I'm sort of nearly finished writing it, and I've got to edit it. And
so what's your approach? Because happiness seems like a simple subject. An entire book on it. How are you attacking the subject?
I think sort of ties in with something I said earlier on. But I think the modern idea of setting your goals and just believe in yourself and set your goals and move towards those things. We are fed that as a model of that's how you this thing you're entitled to, this commodity called happiness. That's how you achieve it. So if you don't, you've failed. It's a very unhelpful model. It doesn't allow for the fact that life just throws stuff at you. First of all, that idea of what the Greeks used to call fortune. We call poor people now. We call them. We don't, but we use the word losers. We used to call them unfortunates, people that haven't sort of made it, like they've sort of lost at a game, like it's their fault. Whereas before, it was, fortune. Stuff happens in life. So we're fed this idea that you can kind of control your destiny by just sort of self-belief and everything. That's not very helpful. So I've gone back to the earlier ideas. So, for example, you can only control the things that you're in control of. If you don't bother, you don't need to try and control all the rest of stuff, what other people think of you, stuff that's not under your control. If you just let that go, you no longer have that formula for just anxiety and frustration. So I think the key is about having your center of gravity very much within yourself, and when you've got that, then being very open and very connected, but with that center of gravity in there. So that's kind of what it's about. But I think the modern model of happiness is just not really very helpful. And it's specifically a Christian model as well, interestingly, because when Christianity came along and sort of said, right, now here's how you become happy, here is your model, and for the next 2,000 years this is really all you need to know, it created this idea of the kingdom of God. It was the first time that somebody said, no, you suffer now, because obviously it was an appealing religion for people who were suffering. You suffer now and your reward will be off here in the future. And this idea of a ladder and climbing and something and this sort of hovering thing that is always on the horizon after you die, literally, And now we still have that. The Enlightenment comes along and we kind of dispense with the religious talk, but we still have the same model. We have a career ladder instead.
Yeah, a goal up here.
Yeah. You're always moving. You study this so that you do these A-levels so you can study this thing so you can get this job so that you can get this promotion and that promotion and that promotion. So it's always a thing off in the future, and then you get there. And, Alan Watts talks about that if you listen to a piece of music, imagine like a classical, like a symphony, you wouldn't just if it was a record player, you wouldn't just put the record on the final few bars and listen to that. You wouldn't turn up for the last few bars if you went to see it at a concert. You went to hear it at a concert. You listen to the whole thing because it's a piece of music. And we're always fed this idea that it's just about the sort of the climax, the finale off in the distance. And then you get there, and you're like, if you get there, but if you do, sometime in your 40s and 50s, you go, was this it? Was this what I was aiming towards? And your life's happened in the meantime, and you didn't realize it was supposed to be like a piece of music. You were supposed to be dancing.
Yeah. I think that directly relates to magic and magicians as well.
Good, I'm pleased.
Because many of them think that the moment of the effect is what matters. You mentioned it briefly before as in regards to a mentalist. Even if you get it wrong, was the process interesting?
Yes.
And so magicians are more prone, I think, to focus only on achieving the effect and that's it, getting there.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, because that's
just doing that.
Because your show should work.
Yeah, right.
Even in theory, it should work even better if you get tricks wrong. Like a juggler will drop a ball on purpose to remind you this is difficult. This is a very human skill that I put all this work and time into. So I'll drop a ball on purpose because if it's too smooth, you sort of you tune out eventually.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure within my show there are moments that that you remind people how difficult it is. And if it goes too smoothly, I might get something wrong on purpose, or something will go wrong anyway. But that actually helps the show. So it's interesting, particularly with mentalism, to think, would your show work just as well if you messed up a trick or two? And of course, would the trick go just as well? The trick isn't. They said you're right. It's not just the moment, is it? It's that whole 5-10 minutes that people have spent looking at you. That needs to work as its own thing, irrespective of whether when you turn the bit of paper around, it's got the right word on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think more emphasis should be put on that. We'd have a lot more interesting, entertaining magicians. Now, in magic, within magic, can you remember perhaps a nugget of wisdom, some of the best advice you ever received?
Oh God!
I know it's a challenge.
I think probably it's clarity. It's always about clarity, isn't it? I think there's a Di Vernon line about just being able to sum up the plot in a simple line, which is exactly what I said earlier on about the TV shows that I do. You just want to go, that happened. It can't be. No one ever says, he did this amazing trick. He made me think of a card, and then he counted down to that number, and then it was that number of cards that he then counted to, and then it was the sister card, which means the same value, but the same colour, but a different suit, of the card that I picked out of the other deck. That was, no one ever does that. It's just, he just did that. And I think that all that other stuff is the kind of indulgent sort of, and I did it myself a lot, of kind of you get so caught up in yourself and your methods that you go down routes that are nothing to do with the magical effect. And you are creating memories, and all those things are important, so they have to be clear. Stories are really important. Magic's all about a story, isn't it? You're creating a narrative that someone's going to walk away with and go, this happened, so it needs to be clear. Mm-hmm. And whether it's stage or close-up or TV or anything, if it's not clear, it's, why, don't bother.
Yeah. By your own admission, you said you really didn't change much as far as mentalism goes. Now, I disagree, and I think most people, in magic would disagree that you have transformed it, you have changed it, you changed the way we look at it, even. How would you best define yourself or describe yourself? If not, I don't want to ask for you to label yourself, because that's another problem that we get into when somebody says, I'm a mentalist, or I'm a paranormalist, or I'm something like that. But how would you just describe what makes you different, what sets you apart?
If anything, if I am set apart, I think it only comes. That follows automatically from if you're not. It's like if you're a ventriloquist or a comedian, you are immediately going, I'm one of this group of people. We all do the same thing, and you can take your pick as to who you like out amongst us. I've never sort of done that, partly because mentalism wasn't. It's not like when people first saw the shows in 2000, they went, it's one of those guys that does that. It was a different thing, which of course is helpful. Obviously, we know that is a world of magic that does exist, but for most people watching it, it would have been something new. But it's only ever been, I don't mean this in a sort of conceited way, but it's ultimately just been about sort of me, ultimately, in my name, in terms of what the label should be. I've never called it anything. There was a period at the start when it was a psychological illusionist, which I think Anthony Owen I was doing interviews for the Radio Times or something. What do you call yourself? And I had to come up with something. Anthony suggested that, and that stuck for a while, which is fine. But what's nice now, 14 years later, is that I could make a documentary on art forgery, for example, probably, and that would sit quite well within my world as we're doing a magic show. And I think that would be difficult to do if there was a clear label on me. So I've really avoided that, and it means that sometimes my name will get used as a kind of, you've got Derren Brown, a bit like Uri Geller. There's a kind of the name brings with it a kind of a thing, and I think that's really helpful. I think that's much more helpful than questions of, well, are you a magician or a mentalist? If you're using cards, then that's magic with a mental theme. It doesn't matter. It is just about you ultimately. It has to be that as a performer. It's about you.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for anybody that's an amateur that wants to become a professional, that might help them to make that leap?
Talent and energy, same thing.
Yeah.
That's it.
Comes right back.
It's always the simple things. You're only in control of the things you're in control of. Everything else you can let go. Success, fame, all the rest of it, that'll either happen or it won't happen. The bit you're in control of is your talent and your energy. And that's why people then say, oh, and I got the lucky break or the phone call that happened. And yes, it is lucky, but it's only lucky because you've already got those other things in place. I did get a lucky phone call, but that was because I'd spent 10 years doing magic in Bristol, written a couple of books, magicians, and I loved it. That was my life. I wasn't chasing it as a thing at all. I think, you can't. You just drive yourself mad if you try and chase it because it never arrives. Yeah. As I said, you never have that thing of going, oh, great, I'm here now. You just love what you do. You make sure that you'd be perfectly happy just doing that for the rest of your life, exactly as it is now, just doing that. And then as long as you're continuing to develop your talent and getting it out there, then yes, you'll get some sort of lucky break. Yeah. But it still comes down to you to create that context.
Well, how did that go? You get a call? Had you anticipated this at all, or did it come out of the blue?
No, I got a call from Michael Vine, who's now my manager, saying we're a production company we need somebody to front a Channel 4 show on mentalism. I didn't even really know what that meant. Would you come to London and meet us? So I went to London and had dinner and met him and Andrew O'Connor, who's also the co-owner of Objective. And I just showed them a few things over dinner. And I found out they spent a couple of years looking for someone to do that. And interestingly, I think what nailed it probably in terms of the tricks that I did this trick called smoke, which I did it on Stephen Fry in one of the stage shows. Somebody will know it if you've read my books, but it's somebody thinks of a card. You spread the deck out, you think of a card. I'm smoking a cigarette. I tell you what the card is you're thinking of. When you look back, it's not there, and the cigarette that I was smoking is now the card. And it can work better than other times, depending on,
sure.
You sort of psychologically nudge things here and there, but there's a certain amount of chance.
We can in this, because, we all know a little bit about
the
earlier methodology and stuff like that. Say some things about it.
Yeah. So you'll know it if you know the trick.
Actually assists.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah. So it, I have no idea what you're talking about.
As much as he would like to do.
So it's a card trick. So there's a trick to it. And it worked. Yeah. It worked well with Stephen. It also just happened to work as well with Andrew O'Connor when I showed him. So I do often think, if it hadn't been for that just certain amount of luck falling in place, that trick wouldn't have fooled him as much. And I know, because he said it since, that was the trick that made him go, well, I've never seen anything like this, and we should hire this guy. So, yeah, it's a strange thing to think back on if it was just that. But,
yeah, but no, because you did bring things to that, like I was just alluding to there. The deck is helpful.
Yeah.
It's helpful, but it doesn't stand on its own, and you didn't allow it just to stand on its own. You pushed it further and helped to really narrow the focus down so that you're much more likely to get the best outcome.
Yeah,
and that's
sure.
That's a nice mixture. Sure. Instead of just relying on something that's going to mechanically take care of something for you.
Yeah.
To really invest in it. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Well, thank you.
Right. So now. Here's some odd questions. We're sort of getting into the philosophical section here.
Like that?
One of the viewers asked if you've thought of applying your knowledge of how the mind works to, say, the greater good. Now, we've already answered a little bit, but their specific thing was about increasing rapport between political leaders. Really, something like that. A worldwide good. Or maybe influencing people to conserve energy or recycle or do something, better for humanity.
Yeah.
Now, the book that you're working on, I think, goes a way to achieving that kind of, input.
Hopefully,
right?
Yes.
Hopefully.
But otherwise, of course not. Is the answer.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think, from day one, I have had those kind of requests. Well, could you not use this to achieve this? And of course, it's not appropriate. I'm a guy. Even just, can you hypnotize me to stop smoking? It's like, well, you want to see someone who makes a living out of stopping you smoking, not some guy on TV. Why would I get that there's a certain amount of prestige that might actually help in terms of the suggestion, but no, I'm an entertainer on television, and it would be wrong on so many levels to start doing that. So no. But yeah, next.
Yeah. That was the weirdest one, and I wanted to deal with that one. In your book, Absolute Magic, you talked about kind of a model of powerful close-up.
Okay, yeah.
Powerful close-up magic. I know we're going back a ways to that, but now that you've worked on larger venues for stage and television, we've spoken about it, but is there maybe a model that's similar to what you had set out there, or have your thoughts about how to create powerful magic, has that changed at all?
Well, the variables are different on stage. I think it's the same mindset, but the variables have changed. So I'd probably look back on Absolute Magic now and still agree with it as a sort of a model or things to sort of even aim for most of the time, or some of the time within doing close-up. Some of them, I'm sure, it's a while since I've read it, let alone wrote it, so I'm sure some of the ideas are perhaps a bit ethereal to be really just, using all the time. But the variables become different with stage. Things are said like light and shade, and working with the director, that changes everything as well, because you can't be making those judgments when you're the guy doing it. Because you can't physically can't see what it looks like. Mm-hmm. Everything from is the lighting right to you can't judge. We love to think we know what other people are thinking. But, as a magician, well, when I say shuffle the deck again, they'll believe they've shuffled it before. How do you know? How do you know that? You could just be. I remember seeing a very eminent magician talk a lot about psychological invisibility, doing so, and then just doing the most dreadful thing that was totally opposite of that, and he was utterly fooled himself. This thing was psychologically invisible. It was the one thing I remembered from the performance. It was so bizarre. I was like, well, how do you know? How do you know? How can you ever really know that? So having a director, having somebody that worked with you, goes, no, that doesn't work. Doesn't matter what you think in your head. That simply doesn't work. You need to do it more like this, or yes.
Did you find that you were naturally willing to accept that kind of criticism, or did you have some resistance to it? Were the discussions?
Probably a bit of resistance at the beginning, of course, because you think you know everything. But then it's lovely. Once you do let go of that, it's fantastic. I remember Judi Dench being asked on, I think it was a South Bank show, like a documentary show about her. They said, what do you think your best performance is that you've ever given? And she said, I have no idea. You'd have to ask my director. Which, again, at the time, you sort of think, it's weird, but actually, yes, of course, that makes sense. Sure. You really don't know. And you have a great show, and you don't know why it was so great. You come off going, well, there's a famous story of Olivier doing Othello, I think, and giving an amazing performance and just storming off into his dressing room, slamming the door, and someone knocking on the door going, why are you so angry? That you were amazing. And he goes, yes, but why? Just didn't know why. So, and I've done shows that I thought were great, and Andy was in that night and was like, I don't know, not tonight. Other shows I thought it was terrible. And he was like, it was fantastic. What are you talking about? So you can't judge those things. So, yeah.
Wow. When we're starting a little bit to talk about the creative process, which is quite a subject to get into, because you're blending mentalism, theater, storytelling, magic, elements, lots of things all together. So, as the process is developing, do you find that you're starting with an idea first, or a number of effects, or an overall theme?
Mm-hmm.
How do you?
Well, certainly with the stage show, certainly it always begins with a sort of, what are the sort of moods, what are the feelings you want to create, what are those kind of broad stroke, the first question in my head was always, here are 2,000 people, 3,000 people trapped in a room with me, the doors are locked, they've got expectations, it's, Derren Brown's going to fuck with my head and all this, there's certain expectations they've got, so I've got to live up to that, so that, it has to start with that, so that's the broadest stroke that it delivers and then has to over-deliver on that sort of note, and then you kind of one level of more detail, what are just theatrically, because it's about theatre ultimately, so what sort of moods and tones and things do you want to create, and then you start to think of, what sort of effects might lead to those or be helpful to create those sorts of feelings and tones and so on. And then you get into specific effects. And finally, last of all, I think will be the methods and how actually do it. So that's the only way of preserving the really big important stuff and not getting bogged down in the wrong things. Having said that, sometimes, particularly after, this will be the 7th show that I've done, there is sometimes a sense of, kind of done that. What haven't we done? Haven't really ever done psychometry. Maybe should we do something with psychometry? There's a bit of that sometimes, although historically they tend to lead to the weakest things in the show. When it starts off with the idea of a trick, like you just read something, what a beautiful method, let's do that. They're the weakest thing. I always know they're the weakest thing because it's the bit that goes, when we film it and put it on TV, there's always things that have to come out. And sometimes it's just a standalone piece that can come out so everything else will edit together well, but often it's the thing that isn't maybe, not the strongest thing in the show. Yeah. And it's always been those things that have come from method or trick first, as opposed to, bigger theatrical feeling. Or, there was like in one of the shows in Enigma, there was, you've got a hypnotized girl wearing a sort of a smock, and I'd always pick someone with long hair, so you've kind of got this sort of slightly Asian horror kind of character going around the audience and then, stopping and pointing to someone, and it's, on a good night, that was really kind of creepy. It was, and you wouldn't get that in a magic show or in a play or anything else. So, I'm trying to think of things that you would only get if you came and see my show. So, yeah, it's that kind of stuff is always the starting point.
Yeah. Do you find that it's different from when you were first starting out? Were you putting together sets just because, this is the trick I like and that's the trick I like, and is sort of just stringing it together?
Yeah, when it started out, it was kind of my corporate act. The first stage show I did, which didn't get televised, but it was, I was doing it back into 2003, 2004, something like that, was my corporate act in the first half, and then a séance in the second half. And and then but it was the second half was kind of interesting. There was a bigger sort of narrative to it, and that was that started to open up ideas for the future shows.
That leads into it, because I was going to ask, and if you think that anybody that's working now, in whatever commercial venue they're working in, should consider, let's get something unifying as far as a narrative goes, going for the show.
Yeah, kind of. I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I think it's, and again, it's weird if somebody did that, it might just look like they're sort of copying, or just sort of, so it is important to find your own thing, and then frustrating if someone, if me or someone out there is doing something fairly high profile with a particular template, and of course you look at it and go, well, surely that's the most obvious way of doing it, and if I can't do it like that, then it's, of course, it's, makes it more difficult. But I think, for me, I think it's all about serving the show, and having a kind of unifying thing gives it. It's layers, isn't it? Layers are interesting, and if you're just doing a series of tricks, that's not as interesting as a kind of something tying it all up. But then you've got to do that right, and it can't be preachy. And but it's serving the show, and again, that still comes down to understanding first of all your character and really giving total respect. And my show is very much, in my head, it's about the audience. It's not about me. It's not about me as a magician. It is about the audience coming in and what their experience is. I don't think that most magicians do think that. They may say they do, but I don't think they do in practical terms as they're designing the show. I don't think they write it from that point of view. And I think if you do, then stuff like that, having a unifying whatever, that comes naturally out of that thought, because that's better for them. That's a better experience if those layers are there.
Yeah. When it comes to inspirations and ideas for you, thematically, when you're looking for that the larger picture, what the audience experience is going to be, where do you find those ideas? Are you reading books, seeing movies, being inspired by things, or thinking about questions that the audience might have?
A lot of it is movies, and you might just go and see a show or a play and think, oh, that was an amazing thing. That's that thing you've sort of taken. Peter Brook talks about, you might not come away with really remembering what the play was meant, but there'll be a kernel of something that you just sort of take away, and that's really what the message of the play becomes. That's the point of it. It becomes that little kernel of something that you just take away, and that that is not necessarily about understanding the whole thing intellectually. So that often happens. Or maybe it is just a moment in something, or in a film, or just a really clever something. So you borrow a lot and you reconfigure it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So now that you've got your idea, how do you go about scripting it? Yeah, you're obviously very articulate, well spoken, well educated. Yeah. So how do you approach this subject to start writing out what you're going to say to the audience?
Well, we sit. So Andy and I and Andrew sometimes as well. Andrew O'Connor will sit and we have a month of what we call the writing period, which is essentially just coming up with the ideas. Again, has to sort of be. It's sort of the overall thing of it will be driven. Has to ultimately be driven by me, because I'm going to be doing it every night for 4 or 6 months, whatever. But we all kind of talk, and between us, we've all worked together for a long time, so that just works well and nicely. And so we'll come up with. And sometimes the stuff I might not agree with, but they'll really fight for it. I think it's a really good idea, so we kind of keep it in. And after a month, hopefully, I've got to do this in a few months' time, we'll have a sense of this is the show. But we never really sit down and write a script or anything. And then the next month is getting it up on its feet in a rehearsal room and just finding the words. So it's sort of devised on its feet, and the rest of the crew will then come in and they'll all play the part of people out the audience, and the show will find itself. Sometimes there's bits of actual script writing, if there's like a monologue or something I have to do where it needs to be really tightly scripted. Otherwise, it just comes from doing it, and then that month finishes, and then the next day I'm in doing it with the first audiences, because you never really know how it's going to work until you've got, and the first audience is still like 1,000 people, so it then has to work. And then you see that it doesn't work, or that the pacing is wrong, or that you've got one slow routine followed by another slow routine. Or there was one idea for the start of one of the shows was this idea for a trick of. It was a really nice idea, I think. And it was I had a series of cards showing like different positions that you could like hand on head, hands in the air, hand on hips. So everybody stand up. I'll choose one of these. All right, everybody do what you think I've got here. So everyone does a fun position. I turn it round. If you did this, stay standing, otherwise sit down. So we do this a few times, narrow it down to one person in the end who's just got it right again and again. And under their seat is a prediction that it was going to be them. So a good sort of opening kind of thing. Came out, did it the first night. That's a 20-minute routine just there. That you hadn't really worked out the maths. That there's 1,000 people here, and it was just horrible. You want to kill yourself. All right, we'll do it again. Forgive me. I'm never going to do this again in my life. But I've got to get to the end because there's a thing at the end, and that's going to pay off later. So I have to forgive me.
The first thing you're asking them to do is calisthenics.
Yeah. We're playing a game. That'll be fun. After 20 minutes, it's not a game.
So when it comes, you mentioned that there will be bits of script writing that have to be a monologue and that kind of stuff, and especially in the TV series, there are a lot of times that you are speaking directly to the viewer at home, to the camera, and those are beautifully scripted. Now, are they fully scripted out to make sure that you?
Yeah, normally they've been sort of written, and they're not normally very long, so I normally just learn them. But yeah,
because I think it makes a big difference to have that impact. Say specifically what needs to be said.
Yeah, it's important, and one of those little telly things that just a weird little skill. It took me ages to read voiceover stuff properly without sounding weirdly like a newsreader, or just the funny weird little TV bits that you just kind of have to.
Yeah, well, you've taken to it really well. I mean, it's obvious. Let's see. Now, in some of the shows, you often reference history or a historical event. That in the 1930s there was a man who was such and such, or
God knows that's all true.
Or there, or there was this experiment that something like that.
Yeah.
Now. Is that for a specific reason? The question that was asked is, do you think that it lends to the credibility that you can connect it to a historical event?
It's about layers. Everything's about serving the show. Like in the last show I did, came out and talked about coming out, talked about being gay at the start of the show, and quite a few journalists were like, "Oh, why do you feel the need to to tell this to people every night? And, the answer is I don't, but it serves the show, actually, because starting off on a different tone and, creates a layer of something. It's a bit disarming. It's a different... So likewise, those kind of historical contexts are about introducing a different feeling and keeping things interesting. And sometimes the only way that I can really get away with doing a particular sort of effect that is... Like in one show, I was doing a sort of X-ray vision routine. And this was an example of actually starting with a trick that I'd found. I thought that's a really lovely plot of things being wrapped up in silver foil, aluminium foil, baking foil, and being able to do this sort of X-ray vision of seeing what's inside. So somebody, cut off some cards and another person's got a dice, somebody else has changed the time on their watch, and they're wrapped up in silver foil, and I'm doing it. And the only way of doing that, it doesn't really fit in with my normal skill base, was to do it in that kind of, this is what was done by some fraud at some point. So we created a whole kind of historical context for it, which is partly true and partly not true. But it's also I just think within a stage show, it can be really interesting. Again, if you really commit to it and make it completely convincing, those things they just create space around what might otherwise be just a kind of a bit of a nothing trick. I still think it was probably the weakest thing in that show, but nonetheless, it made it a lot more interesting by really pointing it and giving it a reality. And you make the story you make the story interesting and give it, again, real human. It was made it interesting to think that this woman who used to do this stuff in the 30s, she was employed by the Russian, by the KGB, doesn't do it anymore, but I met up with her. It was the one thing that people never knew how she did it. It was the one thing that kind of, certainly fooled me as, here's a clip of someone else doing that kind of stuff. Clearly, she's got a magnet in her bra. You can tell that. So, but this one woman, I had no idea. So I met up with her, and she told me how she did it. And I'm not allowed to tell you, but she told me on the condition that I would then do it. So she, in her mind, this thing is now living on. So I'm now going to show you what she did, and then I would do this thing. And it just creates a sort of, suddenly a bit of human interest around what is otherwise just a look at me, aren't I clever
a
trick.
Demonstration of some ability.
Yeah, it moves it away from look at me, aren't I clever, and that's so important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you go about determining the running order of the show? You've got material selection, obviously, thematic, narrative around it, all of that. Do you mess with the order, or do you have requirements, say, for an opening? You learned your lesson.
Yeah. So traditionally those openings have been a kind of a fun game. I think all the stage shows started with that, apart from the last one. That was a very definite, conscious decision to give it a different mood or a different feeling. The last show. So finding an opening, even in Infamous, when I'm just sat in a chair talking, there isn't a trick for something like 12 minutes or something. It's not actually a moment of magic. But even that is still an opening. That is still a choice of how to open a show. And then obviously the finale is the big thing and the most difficult thing. How do you close the show? Particularly, the previous shows have had big closing, big finales, and people then be expecting it as well. So how do you do that without just repeating yourself? And so many plots and everything. So that's the big thing. And then will there be a sort of a narrative? What is there a longer kind of arc? And then also, strangely, a lot of it finds itself. I mean, the shows, we normally have to come up with a title and the poster and a sense of a set and everything way before we've written anything, because the brochures need to have all that information, right, as they go out. So I'm doing one show and I've got my manager going, right, we need a title for the next one. So a lot of the show finds itself as it sort of goes on. There's not often a lot of room to sit down and think, right, from scratch, what will this show be about? So which is why often the titles are a bit generic, or they're kind of crowbarred into, like the end of Enigma. And this spells Enigma, and that's why the show is called Enigma. Well, it's not why the show is called Enigma. That's just, here's how we can crowbar the title of the show. So, yes. So often that sort of sometimes the message of the show or the point of it weirdly just comes out. It just comes from being on the roads. In this last show, Infamous, it did sort of end up having a bit of a message to it. There's sort of a thing about being a kind of disenfranchised or nerdy kid, and a kind of an empowering of that. But it's not like we sat down going, "That's what the show will be about." That happened over the road, and once you've got a sense of on the road, once you've got a sense of, oh, that's what the show's about, then you start tightening things up here and there, or giving that an arc, giving a few lines at the beginning and something in the middle, and then you create the feeling of, now this is what the show's about. But
Yeah,
that's not how it starts.
Is that typically in previews?
No. That's over the course sometimes of months.
During the run, it starts to even tighten up and stuff like that. Now that's a hard thing to do for television because you've got your one shot at it. But you do get the luxury of being able to edit out, take out a piece that didn't work for whatever reason, or put them in a slightly different order if you need to. But how about that work? Where you really are getting one shot at it, is your preparation different than being on stage?
Most of the time, to be honest, I mean, it's been a long time since I was sort of doing street stuff where you can film with a few people, and if there's a couple that they don't really react, you're probably not going to use them. But even then, the idea that you're filming 100, people often say that, did you just film that 100 times and you use the 1 in 100 chance that it worked? And of course, the reality of the cost of filming is you can never do anything like that. But with most of the stuff I'm doing now, it really is one shot. I mean, if the apocalypse thing didn't go very well, it's not like we got a backup guy, we can just do it again. You can't. So you just have to make sure that you're thinking of everything, and that while it's happening, you're kind of on your feet, and you just try and preempt every possible thing that could go wrong. And hopefully the teams are big enough and the production is big enough that kind of, you do have that.
So we were talking about the order, the show order, and during this whole process where you're putting the show together, you must be thinking then that you've got to incorporate the theatrical elements that we've been talking about. So just share how that process goes. There's some design elements, that go into the set dressing and things like that. Do you have a lot of input into how the stage is going to look?
Well, we have a set designer, and between me and Andy, who's directing, and the set designer and so on, those decisions are made. So normally we'll give the designer a brief. So Andy and I, and again Andrew as well, we'll all kind of discuss, and we'll come up with what we think it is. For example, we've just done that actually a couple of days ago. We were just talking about that and got a sense of what we think the set is roughly. We then give that brief to the set designer, who was part of that discussion, and he'll go away and come back with a little model and so on, and then we'll talk about it and discuss it. And then you delegate those things to people that are doing those kind of things.
Yeah, that are good at it.
Yeah,
sure.
but obviously that comes with the bigger the show, the more of a team like that you have, so it's not going to be appropriate for everybody, of course. And you find set designers that are great and get it, and
Well, one of the things that I think is applicable to anybody that's performing platform, stage, any that kind of stuff, is just making sure the props are arranged and look nice on stage. That always seems to be well taken care of in your show as well. How do you decide as far as getting props in and off of the stage, and how the opening starts?
Well, that's classically the director's job, of course, because again, I'm the guy on stage, so it's I can't really see any of that. So naturally, you find things are brought on and off during kind of offbeats, during the kind of you make it as discreet and as possible. So that's kind of fairly standard, really. And then in terms of where things are placed and the overall look, I'm the one guy that can't make that decision because I'm looking at the audience and I'm not getting the bigger picture. So one of Andy's jobs, once the thing's in tech, once we're actually in a theatre and getting it up at its feet and sorting the lighting out and all of that, it's also very important is the lighting. Then he's making those decisions. There are some things I never see, like in the last show, there was a great big bulb that would swing behind me, and this all the lights go out, and it's a big hypnotic induction on the audience. It's a huge swinging light bulb, and I never saw it. One of the best looking things in the show. I just never saw it at all. Saw it on TV. I was like, oh, that's good. And the walls breathing behind me, because we put a projection, using a lot of projection mapping in the show, so that there was a projection of the wall on the back wall, and then it starts to breathe as the audience are breathing, just enough to kind of you're not quite sure what you're looking at. Again, never saw any of that, so it was quite nice watching it back. So yeah, that's why you have a director.
Yeah, very cool. We did talk about your favorite shows, favorite material that you did. During the process of planning and writing and scripting, were there favorite collaborations, your favorite show to write, not necessarily perform? You know, it was just a great writing process. Like, were things ever like clicking along so well that?
No, I think they always sort of feel about the same, which is certainly enjoyable. But it's such a long, you know, the coming up with the ideas is only one small part of it. That's the first part, which can often be really good fun. Sometimes very frustrating. Fun when you know, I remember one of the TV ideas was remember sitting with Ian Sharkey, and we're talking about mind-reading tricks and things. Like, oh, can't we just, I don't know, somebody wakes up and they see their own death in a car crash or something like that. Just something you just try and break out of thinking about minute ideas with something big and, but what was that phone? Sorry. Okay, don't answer it, it's really bad news. So you try and have a kind of a, sometimes out of that came a really actually strong piece. We did that, you know. So sometimes ideas just happen, and it is very quick, and that is fun, and that fires you up. But generally speaking, it's, you come up with the ideas, and it just segues straight into, particularly with TV, a whole production team, and there's so many people, it becomes a whole different sort of thing. That's difficult. I generally enjoy it, but I have to say they will probably feel about, it's just a pressure to get the thing done.
Yeah. Do you remember ever having like a struggle, especially because it, like you said, it eventually has to come down to how you're going to achieve it. Was there ever such a great idea? We'd love to do it, and then the struggle to find the way.
How?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. There's been things on TV, maybe less. Certainly, it was a long time ago since I was really doing tricks on TV, but certainly in the stage show, there's a couple of plots for tricks that we've never really found out a way of doing it that's good enough, that doesn't compromise the trick in some way, compromise what you see. I won't say what it is, because I think we possibly nailed it for this show, so I'll put it in this one. But what's great is just sometimes that, like in the last show that I did, Infamous, probably, maybe not the best judge, probably the strongest thing in it is this mental mediumship section in the second half. So people come up on stage, and I do mediumship, and it's hopefully very strong and precise information I'm giving, but I'm saying at the same time, like, I'm making this up, I'm lying to you, I can't do this, and you know, it's interesting, hopefully theatrically, an interesting kind of place that people put in, because they're like, well, that's amazing, but he said he's not really doing it, and you know, I like that. That came out of, that was just one afternoon because if any of you have seen the show, there are 52 chairs up on that stage. And originally, there are 52 because originally it was a climax to a card trick. We've just done a card at any number. And the climax was, well, you know, it was all about, you know, not touching the deck. It was all about as clean as possible. But, you know, obviously I have touched that deck at some point. So I need to do it with a deck that no one's touched. Well, there are 52 people here, and they all stand up, and all those seats they're on just sort of flip up, and they've got a big envelope underneath. And the card would also be at that number as they count down. And we did it, and it was fine, but it was just too cardy. The second half just felt too cardy. So we can't do that. But then what are we going to do with all these seats? And we need people up on stage, and I kind of need people there for the next bit, because I'm choosing people from that for the next trick. So literally one afternoon, it was like, mediumship? Try some mediumship? So I just tried it. I tried it that night, and it ended up actually being probably the strongest thing in the show. Wow. There's another thing, which was counting rice, which was another thing. I had a terrible thing, it just wasn't working. It was, you know, the old sort of vaudeville trick of eggs on a tray, like you put some glasses, fill with water in a tray, and then you make tubes, and you put the eggs on top, and you bang the tray out the way, and the eggs fall. I mean, that's supposed to be like a self-working science trick that a 5-year-old can do. I could not. They were going everywhere every night. It just didn't work. It's embarrassing. And there's only so many times you want to do that before you're like, can I just not do this anymore, please? So we dropped it, but it was like, okay, we just need something else. So it was like, how about bowl of rice? Reach in. It's like the number of, because there's numbers on the board. It's all to do with numbers that people are choosing, and like, so 37. So I'll pluck out 37 grains of rice from the bowl. And it just went in one day, and maybe it's just me as a magician thinking, but it also I think it's one of the strongest little bits in the show. It's a funny little trick, and it's kind of, you know, hopefully a fooler. And, that didn't come out of any real writing process other than just, we need to put something in, need to try something for tonight, so let's do that. So, can't remember what your question was, but sometimes that happens too.
Yeah, it's great answers. It doesn't matter to me as long as the answers are right.
Well, that's good.
So, would you think that there's any such thing as a perfect effect? Now, you've created things that definitely seem to achieve perfection.
Very kind.
That's why I think that's why everyone loves what you're doing and watches in amazement and magicians that think about what they're doing and mentalists that think about what they're doing can have a lot of respect for the results that you get because they definitely seem perfect. Like there doesn't seem to be a flaw where it's going to be figured out, that kind of stuff. So even if you don't think that there is something that is perfect, let's just say, what are the elements that you would need to have in an effect to make it seem like it was perfect?
I should say, you saying that reminds me of the last night of one of the stage shows. I think it might have been Something Wicked This Way Come, and Andy had come to the last night. We were still doing notes after the show, still finding ways of improving it, laughing at it because it was stupid, because we're never going to do it again in my life, but there's always stuff that you're looking for to change. So, I could do this and do that, and so I think a perfect trick is indistinguishable from the performance of it. So you're never going to get a perfect performance because you can't. That's just the trick. May be structurally sound and fooling, but it's how you do it. Which is why I've never quite understood that thing of magic transports us back to a childlike state of wonder, or that magic's important because it sort of has this or that meaning. It doesn't have any meaning. I think if you do a trick and you're just shabby and you've got bad breath and they don't want to see a trick at that time, that's what you've done. That's what you've created, a feeling of irritation, and that's it. There's nothing. It's nothing. If you don't make it important, then it isn't important, and that's. I really don't see any other way of approaching it. So likewise, the only perfection really is going to come from if you perform it in a way that makes it perfect, and that's not going to happen. However, in terms of like things being as good as, or as workably kind of good enough, I think it's about, I hate to repeat myself, but it's about drama. It's about creating genuine points of interest which don't come from thinking of tricks and methods. They think of drama, and what is it that makes one thing interesting and not another? A card returning to the top of the deck again and again could be interesting. Maybe it's not about drama, that's just about it being fun. But there's another plot where you might be trying not to get the card. You're trying to lose the card in the middle, and it keeps being back on the top, and that's a weird sort of thing. And so now you're struggling because you're trying to lose the card, and it keeps being on the top. And maybe that's that creates a different sort of interest around the same thing. So creating drama, which means making it human, which means making it real. A friend of mine, I remember him coming down to breakfast. I was staying over there, and he'd sort of been in card magic a while, and he came down. He had this trick, so he said to his girlfriend, he said, "So I had a dream last night." She went, "No, you didn't," and that was it. He just abandoned the trick at that point. So it's like, well, that's another whole thing, isn't it? How do those things become, real and engaging when you're just doing a trick, going into a trick? That's kind of less interesting, isn't it? So it's about ultimately engaging people, and you engage people by understanding, I think, how to. The trick itself is sort of not that. It's important, but it's not the. We all know that a good magician could take a really simple trick and make it feel like a miracle for somebody. So it's engaging people, and that is just about. It's about people, and it's about drama, creating space around what you're doing, probably before you even really begin, let alone the final moment when the magic happens. So I know there's a really kind of woolly answers in a way, but I genuinely think, even after years and years of doing this, it is important. That is the stuff that matters. It's the only stuff that matters.
Sure, absolutely. Let's take a break from me and see what questions we have from the audience that's here. I know we have some, and we have set up a microphone over here, so we'll start right out.
Hi.
You got a question for Derren?
Yeah, any question I ask, I think first needs to be prefaced with a heartfelt expression of gratitude for the influence you've had. And I don't think I'm alone in saying that.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, see? I told you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You've shared a lot of your philosophy with us, and I think I'm unlikely to be in a room with someone with such an unparalleled depth of experience and background in the industry. I'd like to ask you, and you may have already touched on this, but I'd like to ask you two things. What was the most important thing you learned as a performer? And what was the most difficult thing that you learned as a performer?
Most difficult thing, most important thing. I think my mind goes back to that idea of clarity again. I think, particularly for mentalism, pace. If I look at a big difference between what I was doing before sort of getting into TV and then before doing stage shows, when I was just a working mentalist that would occasionally do a sort of like a platform set, I had no understanding of pace. It was so self-indulgent. And there's a DVD that I'm on. It was a lecture for international magic, and I look at that and I just makes my skin crawl. It's just so slow. No understanding of, I said about this is happening in those people's minds. Nothing really to do with it. It's all happening. It's their experience that's counting here, not how important I think I am. So a big thing that changed was just pace, variety, light and shade. I think those are so important for any sort of live performance, and mentalism in particular. Mentalists suffer from that more than anybody because it's so easy just to get slow and indulgent and the rest of it. So that's probably the most important thing, along with the clarity point I said before, clarity of plot. The most difficult thing for me is, what do I find really... nerves I never have a problem with. I've always have to create nerves sometimes. I think it's important to find adrenaline if you don't have it. I think it's sort of the interesting thing, most interesting thing, which is not quite what you're asking, is that thing of getting over your own ego and realizing it's not about that. I think that's probably very difficult if you decide to do it. I think it can happen naturally, and I'm not saying I'm like this egoless before, but there's definitely a way of thinking about performing and doing shows that isn't about you and is about other people. So that's like as an ongoing thing that's interesting to explore and not always successfully achieved. I think that's certainly interesting. There's all technical stuff, vocal projection, how to talk every night for 2.5 hours to a big audience every night for 6 months. And do that and project without losing your voice, because if you lose your voice, that's it. That's a massive, massive deal, and it's not like anybody else can go on in your place. So those technical things. I don't think anything's felt difficult. I'm not really aware, because if I was going to really struggle with something and it felt wrong, then I just probably wouldn't do it. I think that wouldn't suit me as a performer. I couldn't do a lot of, like on the TV, I used to hate the stuff where you'd be sort of a hidden camera thing and you'd go and you'd embarrass somebody or you'd embarrass yourself, you'd create an embarrassing situation. I used to hate that, so I didn't really do it. That would be a big challenge to have to go and do that. So you sort of find stuff that feels like it comes naturally. So maybe that's a reason why I don't really have a memory of things feeling difficult per se. But there's definitely technical stuff, voice production, performance energy. I remember when Andy was first working with him, and we were sort of talking about, he was saying, like, okay, more energy. Rehearsing a stage show. I didn't know what that meant. What does that mean, shout? What does that mean, more energy? Somebody has to take you through that. So that was a big learning curve. That was certainly a lot to learn, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Great.
Great question.
Yeah. And if we could have another question. Yeah. Fantastic.
Hi, Derren.
Hi.
Hello. I've wondering that you're obviously a big fan of the darker side of magic. Do you ever feel like you've taken it a bit too far with the participants, and how far do you know to actually take it with them?
The dark side, yeah. Well, I think I think again, to me, it's just about drama. So if somebody's heading towards, like with the shows I've done, like Apocalypse and so on, I imagine some people probably would think, oh, it's too much, it's too dark, which is fine. I think if it was witless, if it was just about shocking people, then you don't have license to do that. Because you have license to do that if it's very clear you're doing it for the right reasons. Then somebody going through a dark journey to get to a positive resolution, that is just drama. So you have to balance it right. It's questions of taste. And then, of course, that is subjective, and some people won't like them. But there generally hasn't been an issue, and certainly people that go through them have always been really grateful for it. I mean, they've loved it and got a huge amount out of it. So there's not been any kind of question of it actually kind of falling on the wrong side. So yeah, I think it's about why you're doing it, and if things feel witless or they just feel like a lot of the shows I've done have been quite controversial, but it's not like I sit down going, right, how can I shock people with a new show? It's not. It's what I said. It's a dramatic hook that you want to watch, and it's something that feels like it's worth doing. There's a message or a reason for doing it. That's all it is. And the rest of it, you just make the drama as strong as possible. It just happens that when the drama's strong and it's real life, you start to have shows that are going to be a bit controversial, but that's not. I don't really seek it for its own sake.
Yeah. Contingent to that, I think when you're talking about that of when you created a sleeper agent, it probably created a lot of controversy. I don't know because I wasn't here when that was broadcast, but that one in particular, if you even attempted to do it in America, I'm not even sure that it could happen.
No, probably not. Well, the Seance show ended up being at the time was the most complained about show in TV history. It was only like 250 complaints, but that was, a lot. And that was before it went out. That was just the idea of it, kind of religious groups taking exception to it, either spiritualists saying I was going to trivialize it, or other religious groups saying I shouldn't be doing it because it's, serious stuff. So I think what's happened, I would imagine, is over the years, because people have got used to, I sort of do stuff in that kind of area, that where the complaints really come from, where people's objections come from, it all happens beforehand, and actually people just got used to it, so they know it's fine. I like to think when you're actually watching the show, the darkness is, in context, just kind of works and is well placed. But that is, of course, a very subjective thing in some people. If you don't like the show, that's one good reason not to like it, of course. How can you put someone through that?
Yeah. Thanks. Do we have another question? Yeah. Terrific.
Hi.
Do you think you're going to go into a movie format at some point? And if yes, where would you see you? Scriptwriter, actor, director?
Well, I've thought, Apocalypse to do Apocalypse again as a movie would be really interesting. Seeing a horror film where the gimmick, if you like, of the film is that the guy in it thinks it's real, and that's kind of very interesting to me. It's one thing to have an interesting idea. It's another thing to actually get the right people to be fired up by it, let alone put yourself through the hell of making a film and the nightmare of all that, and it might just not be worth it in the end. But or maybe there's those kind of documentary films that also kind of have a different sort of feel to them. So that it might be interesting. Time is always the thing for me. I don't really get a lot of time, but maybe over the next few years, I think that would be kind of interesting to do.
And in what capacity?
Similar
to what you're doing?
Yeah, I think there might be a way of just doing. It's like if I did a show in a stadium. If I just did a tour of stadia, it would have to be a very different show to what I'm doing at the moment in theatres. So likewise, if I was going to make a movie, but doing the sort of Derren Browny stuff that I do, but as a movie, you'd have to think of it as a movie, which is again very different in terms of you putting yourself in the minds of the people watching it than watching just a TV show or a stage show. So I don't know, but I like watching documentary movies. You go to the cinema and you see a well-made documentary that's been released as a film. I like that. So it might be there's something in that kind of area. And I think a lot of things I've done could have worked in that format.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks. Do we have another? Terrific.
Hi. I think a lot of people might know that in addition to the mentalism and magic stuff, you've also got a sort of excellent body of portrait painting and photography, which I think there's an exhibition of.
That's very kind of you. There is indeed an exhibition on at the moment, as in when we sat here at the moment, not for people watching this, I'm sure it'll have finished by then, but yeah.
I've kind of got two questions. do you think that there's a creative continuity between the visual art that you do and the mentalism stuff? And the second question is there anything that you're bad at just to make us feel good?
Oh, that's very sweet. Can't drive, can't play football, can't do lots of things. That's easy. I think creatively, I think that if there's a continuity for me, it's actually about, I've always loved the idea of facsimile, things appearing real when they're not. So I love magic, I like taxidermy, I've always liked kind of, robots and androids, and I like painting things that, not exactly photorealistic, but nonetheless they play with the idea of realism. So that I find interesting. I don't know if, other than that, it kind of, to me, they're quite separate worlds. I like performing, that's a very public thing, and then the painting and everything is actually quite a private thing. So I enjoy the contrast rather than sort of merging the two together. But, yeah, I mean, maybe there's something in whatever that takes as an eye for painting and photographing as well. Thank you for even knowing about that. Maybe that does kind of feed a bit into an eye for magic or two. Yeah, magic or so. I don't know. But it's a very different thing for me. But I do love that idea of, I love acting, good acting. A lot of my friends are actors. I love the idea of acting, and there's a lot of acting in the shows that I do. I'm basically saying a script every night. That is, it's a script, and I have to deliver it as if it's real speech that I'm sort of making up as I go along. So I love all of that. I love that playing with illusion, essentially, isn't it? So that is the thing that kind of goes across the whole.
Yeah, sure.
Different areas.
Do you feel when you're painting that it's more meditative, a sanctuary? You're doing it.
It is a bit. Yeah, it is a bit like that. Yeah. It does feel. It's quite. Which is why I take photographs and then work from photographs as opposed to have people sit and. So I like doing it on my own.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, terrific.
Who is that? Hi, Tim Trono.
Hi. A lot of the shows nowadays that I see, they're close-up or stand-up shows, are just filled with tricks or mentalism pieces and stuff. And one of the things that I think you bring forward that I saw on shows from the past, well, not that I saw, but Mellini and the block of ice, or Houdini and the water torture. It's something that people walk away with, a memory that they walk away with forever. And you have that in your shows. Can you talk a little bit about that one perfect piece, that one memory that they're going to walk away with?
From my own things, you mean?
Yes, in your own work in general.
I was slightly distracted throughout all that, because in the half-light and hearing you in the darkness, there's something vaguely Kevin Spacey about you.
I was seeing it too.
Just so this, I don't think I heard a word of that. So sorry, say it again. So
I'm going to move back over here.
God, would you mind repeating the question? Sorry.
Just talking about kind of the one perfect miracle, the thing that people are going for. You always have one piece in your shows where it's the thing that people walk away with, that they click, that they catch on to. So many shows that I see don't have that. They're just filled with a bunch of tricks, a bunch of mentalism pieces.
Well, I think that's just about being aware of it, and again, helps having a director, because he's able to give you the experience of this is actually how it's coming across in the audience, which may not be how it is in your head on stage doing it, but it's all, because I think the difference between something being theatre and being like a cabaret act, there's plenty of very good high-end mentalists that do stage shows, but they're sort of like watching a very good corporate act, and for me the theatrical aspect of it is more interesting, and I think the big difference is moments, is understanding moments that aren't about a trick working, they're about a kind of, and the example I use, because it always comes to mind, and I don't mean that it was amazing or brilliant or even worked every night, but the weird thing with a girl in the audience wearing a smock, she's sort of pointing, she's hypnotising the audience, she's pointing somebody out, she's been walking around the rows to choose somebody, and that, it's something I know people will remember that, because it's going to stick in the mind, and it's not like something you've seen. And a lot of the shows I have people that are sort of hypnotised and stood up and a bit, comatose, and I possibly even overused it now, but those, it's just being aware, isn't it, that's quite separate from thinking of tricks and methods. That's just thinking about people in a room, trapped in a room, what are you going to do, what sort of things can happen. And just having a sensitivity that's beyond just sort of the trick and the climax of a trick and the plot of a trick. But I think that's where I think that's all it is, and it's quite simple. And then being open to those, which again is where it's easy having a director, because you won't necessarily know it yourself, but someone that's going to go, actually, forget the climax of the trick. That bit where you did that, there's something really compelling about that bit, so let's bring that out. I remember seeing Uri Geller do his stage show, and there was a lot of kind of showing of newspaper headlines and stories where he'd done something amazing, and he was doing, spoon bending and things. And to me, those bits were less interesting. There was just one moment where he was doing watch stopping, and he's got lots of watches over the floor, and it's a very classic Geller moment. And he sits down, he picks up a watch, and he has to put on his glasses to read the time. And that was the one moment that to me was just utterly human, and really stuck in my mind. That kind of if I was directing it, I'd be like, that's it. It's not about the newspaper headlines and how amazing it was that you did this or did that. That's like, well, great. But if you're telling us that, okay. It was that moment was far more interesting, and I think it's that, and it's why it helps to have a director that's sensitive to those kind of things too. But otherwise, it's just being aware of the capacity and the power of those sorts of things.
Yeah, excellent.
Thank you, Tim.
Cool. Now, I think that was all the questions we have now from the audience. Let's talk about, you've written in the past for magicians when you were coming up with magic tricks, and then you've moved beyond that to a realm where it should be and should remain impenetrable as far as the methods that are involved.
Yeah.
A lot of people guess at them. There's speculation all the time, and there are people that try to deconstruct online.
Sure.
Does that trouble you at all that they do that?
It's going to happen, so you have to kind of decide. It doesn't trouble you. I mean, I think sometimes things do for a bit, like you're saying earlier about people lifting your act and stuff like that. Of course, the first few times it's a bit galling, and then you just have to like, well, that's going to happen. So it's either going to bother me or it's not. So no is the answer. It doesn't.
Yeah. Now I do want to talk so that we have, like I said, because you've developed things that other people have used.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about some of those things, but in a way that makes sense for who you are right now.
Okay.
So let's say that if you were still mortal. What might be your favorite way of getting a thought into somebody's head that we could learn from?
I'm not sure. What are we talking? Are we talking methods specifically, or are we talking?
Well, yeah. Let's just say, for instance, that you couldn't do it with your abilities. Your current way of doing things. Let's just say that you had to go back 13, 15, 20 years ago. And give us an option so that we could hope to emulate what you're doing. Is what I'm trying to say.
Of course, I do have to be careful, a little bit careful, to talk about methods, of course, because ultimately I know this DVD will be out there and people will be watching it that aren't magicians, and naturally you kind of you do guard the stuff that you discover for yourself. But what I don't get, because there are a lot of electronic methods out now for doing precisely that kind of thing. And I think if you are performing every night, stuff like that is terrifying. Not saying there's anything wrong with it, and of course I'm sure for some sort of performances it's amazing and cuts through lots of problems. But it just, all the stuff that I use for me is stuff that is a joy to use, as opposed to, I don't mean use as a prop, but just sort of the sorts of methods I use are I know they're going to be enjoyable. I'm not going to be going, is that going to work? Is that going to work? I don't want to be doing that every night. I don't want to be feeling that every night at the same point in the show for 6 months. And that I'm totally and utterly in control of. So there's no issue of stuff like that.
So advice is to like look for the method where you're self-reliant really more than...
I think so, yeah, but it depends. If you're just performing occasionally, then of course some of those things, of course they're going to be appealing. But I hate to sound like, just aware of sounding really kind of old-fashioned, but there's nothing like really understanding and learning the craft of it. And these kind of electronic shortcuts don't really help with that. Maybe there'll be a whole new wave of something that will be just what mentalism and stuff will become. But to me, it's just less fun. It's more fun using... There was a moment in Infamous and I've used it before on the stage shows, and I won't say exactly what it is, but it was just a bold piece of nothing that created the most, I think, really, really strong effect, I like to think. And it just knowing that it's nothing, it's just that kind of, and that's the joy of mentalism. To me, that's what, the love of it, the fun of it, and the kind of, those golden things that you hang on to. And when it's just words, it's nothing more than just words. And I'd much rather be doing that than have bought some electronic thing that I'm just hoping is going to work. And, why, we don't know, we charged it before, the batteries, I don't understand, the batteries replaced. I don't know, I mean, who wants to, it's just horrible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? And then also, it just opens up, it's just creative. It opens up the creative aspect of it that really is why we're doing it.
Yeah. Now there are techniques that mentalists are using currently. Have you heard of this? It's this thing called dual reality. You've heard about it?
I have heard of it. Yes.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts that might help them? Because part of what they have to do with this dual reality thing is to create effects for both people that are involved and people that are watching the people that are involved.
Yeah.
So they have to do this, and sometimes the people that are directly involved don't experience exactly the same thing. They still experience something really interesting, something fascinating.
Yeah.
But do you have any thoughts to help mentalists that are working to make sure that the person who's experiencing something completely different doesn't make the audience feel like they didn't get the same experience,
Do you know, I think it's 3 words, isn't it? People aren't stupid.
Yeah.
And I think it's so easy when you get, particularly with stuff like dual reality or false memories and psychological invisibility, a lot of it's based on a sort of unspoken presumption that your audience are a bit stupid. And that's so dangerous. They're really not. And there's a lot more of them than you, so they will work stuff out between them as well. So, yeah, dual reality was something that I think around the time I wrote Pure Effect, it was sort of Kenton Knepper was doing a couple of things, and that led to a routine I had called Reminiscence, which was something that sort of got my name known amongst magicians as a kind of, a different way of approaching mentalism. And then it sort of, after not that long, became a bit of just use dual reality. Like I could just use this or that or pre-show or whatever. Like it's a sort of easy answer. And of course, like anything can be done badly or done well. I find now it's not really at all available to me because I can't have people going away going, well, that's not what, because it will come back at me now in a way it wouldn't if I wasn't sort of known. Yeah. I remember somebody saying my dad had been up on stage with Paul Daniels and done, I guess it might have been like the hot chair routine or something, and there was just a thing telling him what to do. And this guy was so disgusted by it, and like, isn't that awful? And of course, I'm thinking, well, it's such an amazing routine. It's one of the classics of, British magic. And I don't know whether the dad in question had sort of felt that, or just whether he'd told his son and his son had decided that was terrible. But it's, you just don't know. Andy Nyman has a story about using a pre-show thing with a woman for a trick that he does brilliantly. And of course, his pre-show would have been brilliant. And it was a choice that she makes beforehand. And she said afterwards to him, I feel really sort of betrayed by that. So, and he just felt terrible about it. Yeah. So you just don't know. I did a routine once using a kind of dual reality thing. Actually, it was Reminiscence. I did a form of that once. And the guy afterwards was so furious. So, and I'd pushed the dual reality probably a bit too far. I'd try to kind of, be a bit not lazy with it, but just kind of, in terms of that balance of how great it is for the person, great it is for the audience, I was definitely coming down on the audience side. And I learned a real lesson. That was I think that was the last time I used it in that, that overtly. Yeah. There's always little sort of convincers and things here and there, of course, which are lovely. But when it becomes a lazy choice, let alone one based on the fact that you sort of think, well, people will just automatically believe what I want them to believe, brackets, because they're stupid, that's just wrong. People aren't. They really aren't.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Reminiscence. Someone wrote in and said that apparently you have new work on it or have altered it in some way.
No?
Not
at all. No, I did it. Well, this is years ago. I did work on it a bit. The effect, if anyone knows it or doesn't know it, is that it was a series of cards that would have words like past, future, travel, sex, money, whatever, and the sort of typical things that maybe topics that tarot readers would sort of talk about. And somebody chooses one of those, and they're invited to kind of just look at that, whatever the word is, and kind of just turn it into whatever sort of images come to mind, and try and visualize those things. And so, if it was past, you might think of a memory from childhood, whatever, and then I would start to sort of tell them what those things are. And it did turn into, and when I was doing it, even with this guy, he was just furious about it. I was out in the audience doing it, so people in the audience, I wanted to make it much more about the audience. So I'd say, okay, is there anything, so you're at school, can you remember, is there a teacher? Do you know the teacher's name? Okay, think of the teacher's name, and I'd ask people in the audience to sort of say what they thought the name was. So the effect became much more about that. So I did start to sort of move it into a different area, but I dropped it when I realized that I was fooling myself a bit, which is not a good thing to be doing. Yeah,
right. Now, sometimes you're taking some risks in what you're doing when you're getting information from somebody or receiving information or relaying information to them, and sometimes you'll miss, right? Mm-hmm. It can happen to anybody. So do you have suggestions on how best to deal with that kind of issue where you've obviously missed the information completely?
Well, again, it's two things, isn't it? One is, in a way, the getting of the information, although it proves that you can do it, it's the least interesting part. Really, the interesting bit is what you were doing to get there. And I think it's perfectly possible to get it wrong in the end, but for the person still to be left with, okay, but what was it? What was that? What were you doing? Why were you having to hold on to my hand? What is it about my hands that would tell you? That's interesting because that's about them, as opposed to you got something right. So it's fine, and it's just human considerations, isn't it? And if you're performing mentalism and you get something wrong, that's a good thing occasionally to happen. It's like the juggler dropping a ball. So the worst thing you can do is become embarrassed and guilty and panic, and it's fine. You got it wrong. It doesn't work all the time. That's fine. And it sounds like you're saying like avoid being immediately like think of this and now I have it and done. Because then there's nothing. If you miss that, there's nothing. If all you're selling is that you're clever, then that stuff is embarrassing, because then they've got nothing to do other than smirk. Ah, Mr. Clever Guy got it wrong. But if it's not about you, the performer, it's about them, and your sensitivity to them, then the odd thing being wrong is good. It's good. Get some things wrong on purpose. Right? And how about when you're getting information from somebody you've never met them before, completely cold, so that you're basically able to read them? Are there tips on how to go about just my starting point with any sort of cold reading is to talk about myself. Sounds awful, but if you just discuss your own insecurities and your own kind of things that you think make you complex and interesting, because it's a nice lesson to learn that everybody else will go, God, no, that's me. So of course, they're actually things that don't make us interesting at all, though, because they apply to us all. So I normally find that's the way in, and then
there's some really, that's fine. There's some really good sources where people might want to learn that or within magic.
No, just yourself. Just talk about all the things that make you complex and interesting, and people will. But I don't do it very often. If I'm doing that kind of stuff, it's normally in a kind of debunking sort of capacity, and I'll mix whatever hot reading I can in with the cold reading, so it's a different sort of thing. But generally, in terms of if you're going to do that, I always think a good place to start. And then you've got endless resources, long as you can see yourself with a certain amount of objectivity.
Yeah, and you did mention earlier there's also the pitfall of pre-show. Share some thoughts on possibility of making it better, good, as opposed to not using it. Should someone or shouldn't someone?
You just have to treat everything. Give everything the same weight and the same process and the same logic as It's not an easy answer. Oh, just do it in pre-show. Can you make this decision now, and then I'll ask you to do it. It can't be that. It has to be every bit as real and every bit as thought through and convincing. Because people aren't stupid. It's a really simple thing. If it's a lazy answer, then it's no good as an answer.
Yeah. And you've become known for using hypnotism a lot. It drives some of the effects. It really was like a core both Apocalypse and Assassin, right? So because it's necessary. So for someone who's aspiring to be a hypnotist, what are the things that they should focus on? The techniques that they should focus on?
Well, I had a thing that happened once. I was doing hypnosis as a student a lot, so I learned it. So I'd have people come to my room in halls in college, and I'd hypnotize them, and if they were good, I'd say, if you come back and I click my fingers, you'll go back into the sleep. I'd leave them with that suggestion, and they'd come back, and I'd be able to put them straight out. And then one afternoon, a guy comes who I thought I'd seen before, and I hadn't. Actually, it was his first time. But I said, "Come on, sit down and sleep," and he went straight out. We did the hypnosis, and afterwards I said, "How does it compare to last time?" And he said, "Oh, I haven't been before. This is my first time." So I was like, "Well," and I was like, "Why did you do that?" And I realized, of course, that it was, I'd been learning hypnotic scripts and this and that, and actually it wasn't about that. It was just his conviction at that, my conviction, his belief in what I was saying, the fact that he happened to also be clearly suggestible and responsive just made that work. And that was a big stepping forward thing for me. Nowadays, also, there's endless, I'm sure, YouTube videos and ways of learning it that weren't around when I was there. So I just read books and medical hypnosis books as well. So it was a very slow route to it, which meant that I learnt it in a kind of very safe way, because you do sometimes run into problems that could make you feel a bit panicky, and you don't want to, So I think actually learning it slowly is important. People say, I think a lot of hypnotists say, well, if you go and see a band and then you crash your car, you wouldn't blame the band, and the fact that you've crashed your car doesn't mean it's my fault. The fact you feel bad doesn't mean it's my fault. That's just people drawing. But sometimes, or maybe it is your fault. Maybe you've treated people in a way that they are confused and they are resentful of what's happened, and they are going to blame that on you, and you have to take responsibility for that, even if it's not that you've done something to their brain and blah, blah, blah. You've as good as if you've left them feeling like that. So I think understanding the subtleties of it is very important and allows you just to do it better, because you're not then relying on something you've learnt on, YouTube or whatever. You're not relying on a kind of, this is how it's done. If you understand it from the inside out, you can make it happen a lot quicker. Prestige really helps. So, I know there's moments sometimes in Apocalypse, like if I just click my fingers and the guy goes out, even though at the beginning of the show, we're showing the priming of how that's kind of working. But nonetheless, when you see it, it looks, you fuck it. You can't just do that. You can't just go up to somebody and click your fingers. And you want to go, well, you can. Doesn't mean you can't do it to anybody at any moment. But we can do it to this guy, because you remember at the beginning of the show, we showed that he was suggestible, and you can see him being conditioned to that. And so in terms of advice, I would say don't learn it too quickly, and realize that it's as much about your own conviction as it is about them. As it is about your technique. I always work on the presumption that it's sort of people are kind of playing along, a kind of unconscious playing along. That if they're not playing along in the moment, they'll unravel it at some point and work it out later. So I never rely on it, again, as a lazy method of, what I ask you to think of, so you'll just say this. Okay, wake up. I want you to think of that. Bang, done. I wouldn't do that, because I know, even if they really believed it there and then, a week later, they're going to be going, hey, you just hypnotized me. That's rubbish. You just told me to say that. So if I use it, it's layered in within other things.
Yeah. And early on in the writings that you did offer to other magicians and mentalists, there was a much copied effect called lift.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Vaguely.
Yeah, a lot of people did sort of lift it.
Right.
So kind of means, yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of out there that there's an explanation for it that may or may not be the right explanation. Would you explain it? Would you teach it to me?
I published it, so it's one of the reasons why I don't do it. It also needs a table with a tablecloth that I wouldn't use. But essentially, you find a suggestible person, you stick their hand to the table, so you've got that's real,
right.
And then you which I can't get away with here, but you'll know it anyway. So you're saying, look, I'm going to So you would have your eyes closed. You've got your eyes closed. I'm saying now you're going to feel this pressure here. You can feel that pressure, and if you try and lift, you can't. You can feel that pressure, but in a moment that pressure will lift, and when it does, your hand will just come up naturally through the air. And then you have somebody else over here with their hand to the table, and I've got my foot on your foot there, if it isn't obvious anyway. And then as they lift their hand, I just let go here. And by that point, it's very natural for you to let your hand go up in the air, right? And then as I bring this hand down, I only need to press, and again, you'll naturally do that. Now, there is a world in which you know exactly what I'm doing and you're playing along, but if I pick the right sort of person and genuinely stuck their hand first, then this is, you never quite know, but hopefully is much more in the kind of, I didn't quite know what was going on, kind of unconscious area than just simply, I was just pressing my foot, I was just doing what he told me to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did that on the International Magic DVD, and I published it. So that's why people, why they were doing it, because I published it, which is absolutely fair enough. Yeah.
Sure. And that's one of those situations where the person with their eyes closed isn't necessarily really experiencing anything much, Unless,
but they can be, that's what I'm saying. If you pick the right person, then it is...
That's right.
And I have absolutely done it with people where that's absolutely the guy afterwards had no idea why his hand was going up. Yeah. But that's if you've got, you've got a few people, you can maybe do a few things with the room, and you go, okay, I'll use that guy because I think it'll be good. Or you can just tell that someone's going to be very responsive to it. But worst case scenario, it'll just kind of work mechanically, but that's a bit of a shame if you've left somebody with a feeling of like, just pressing my foot.
That's right. No, and that's the thing that we've been talking about the whole time. It's not about that, and that's the way of changing the thinking of people who are working and creating now, trying to better themselves as magicians and mentalists. Is that get away from the fact that that's all that's going on, because there is more going on.
Yeah, that's not really very interesting. What is interesting is well, obviously the illusion of what that looks like, and also the kind of, once you've done that, how do you make it as real as possible? So your one challenge is to make this person go away thinking, or saying to other people, that was really weird, that was really odd. Yeah. Even if, you can feel that, but you don't understand why your hand went up in the air just because I let go of your foot. And that's quite likely to happen because you'll feel a certain amount of pressure. And the pressure to do it and play along, that's often can be an unconscious sort of thing anyway. So you're doing it, but you're bewildered and confused as to whether you're just choosing to do it. Like a lot of people just in a hypnosis show will say afterwards, I was kind of sort of playing along, but I don't know, it felt easy just to do what he was saying rather than to put my hand up and go, sorry, this isn't working. So, that kind of dynamic can often be helpful as well. But, why not try and make it as real? Now you've got that, the mechanics out the way, how do you now make it absolutely real for that person so their story is a good one?
Yeah. Do you still do any card tricks? Do you mess around with card tricks at all?
No, not really. No, it's been a long time since I've done any close-up, which is awful, really. And I do make plans to get back into it. I'd like to, but I never really have the time, and it's sort of, and I've taken pretty much 6 months off at the end of this year, and it's proper time off. I'm painting and writing, and I sort of, don't want to be doing my other job really, so it kind of has got left. Yeah. But yeah, I will do it at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah. And earlier when we were talking, you said that you spent a lot of time, a lot of effort on just guessing a coin in somebody's hands. Can you share any insight to making that work without any preparation?
Well, there's quite a few things that if you pick the right person, if you stand in the right place, sometimes the amount of times, I can just see where the coin is. Okay, good. So that's often handy. But yes, there's been plenty of times when you're just simply relying on, right, got to get this to work without any other sort of methods going on. And people do. I mean, the classic thing is they just do a bit of that. Or when they laugh, you make them laugh and they relax, and one hand relaxes more than the other because this is the one they're tensing and this is the one they're thinking about. And Patrick Redford's got quite a lot of sort of stuff in that area of all of which I think is quite sound. So yeah, just it's not being frightened by the fact that doing it for real. What is that? But of course it's not as reliable as the myriad of other methods that now of course are available. But yes, but certainly sometimes you can just see. Yes, that's always good when that happens. Lady with small hands, that really helps as well. Yeah. True, lady with small hands really does help. Yeah.
Did you ever care at the time or while you were developing it that if it didn't work, were there ways that you would get around that?
No, well, I remember coming out on the first night I ever did it on stage. I just sort of got it wrong, and she won the 50 quid because there was 50 quid on it, and the audience loved it. It was like the opening trick as well. They loved it. It went down really well. So that became a bit of a, okay. So night after night, I would just absolutely do it for real. I'd allow it to be 50-50, and because either way it was great. Either worked and was impossible, or it didn't work and was great. He lost his 50 quid. The night we went, he lost 50 quid. That's worth 50 quid when that's 2,000 people going away saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there is also this use by a lot of mentalists now of a false process, a faucess or whatever they call it, because I don't rely on it at all, don't use it. But they're using that to distract from something that's actually going on that might be more mechanical than the process that's happening. How do you feel about that? About the use of...
Oh, it's part and parcel of my toolkit.
Yeah?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, the word faucess is something that Andy and I came up with to describe it, yeah. So yeah, of course that's what you do. You're absolutely committing to the process, but that process may or may not be the real process, and probably it isn't. It sort of depends, isn't it? If you're doing something that's entirely suggestion-based, you may sell it as what it is, or you might sell it as a trick you might sell it like as a conjuring trick, was actually your techniques are genuinely psychological, or more commonly within mentalism, you're doing something that is a mechanical trick, but you're selling it as something that's psychological. But as long as you commit to the process, so it makes sense, irrespective of whether that's the real process or not, but more likely it's not, then you're doing your job well.
Do you feel it's necessary to ground that process in a reality, in a real process, or does that not make a difference in the perception of it?
Well, probably it needs...
or even in the responsibility of the performer to make sure that what's being represented to the audience.
It just has to have integrity. You can watch a medium whose process clearly isn't rooted in like plausible everyday reality. It's rooted in the sort of method, the world they've created as this is how I do it. But then if things don't make sense, if they say that in the other world we're just free-floating spirits, but then they're describing what the spirit is wearing, then you are going to think, well, that doesn't make sense. So I think, irrespective of how grounded your supposed methods are, they just have to make sense within themselves, don't they? And that's often where I think it goes right. And then that has to make sense across the performance as well. If you're saying, I'm doing this through this technique A, then you've got to stick with technique A throughout. And if you're going to introduce other techniques, there just needs to be a clarity of that. So it's just commitment and clarity.
Now this is probably the most controversial question of the whole thing, and that is that I know that you have fans that are outside of magic and mentalism, that firmly believe in some of those processes that may or may not be actually happening at the time. Do you feel? I know you feel strongly about not having someone have a false belief and that kind of stuff. So in your own work, does it bother you at all that they do have a false belief?
I have thought about this, and I think the answer is, it's actually something that Jamie Ian Swiss said, which I thought was great, that there is a bell curve, all right, of possible responses. So I do have people that absolutely believe that every word out of my mouth is true, particularly with the older sort of tricks that I used to do on TV. That's all absolutely true. I have other people at the other extreme that are convinced I'm genuinely psychic, and the whole thing is a sort of a sham to cover the fact that I can genuinely just read minds. I have some sort of supernatural ability. So, and then there are other people that it's all done with stooges. Everyone's an actor. So there's plenty of sort of people at one end or the other that sort of, for whatever reason, no fault of their own, just don't really get what I'm trying to do. But the idea is, and I think as mentalists we have to kind of work on this principle, that there is also hopefully a swell in the middle of like 90% of people or 80% of people that do get it, right? And again, you're only in your life, you're only in control of your thoughts and actions. You can't control what other people do. So what I have to do is make sure that within my work there is a framing that's clear. So, which is why, what I do on TV is different, has a different tone than what I do on stage. There's a framing that's allowing people to sort of get that. but still preserving the entertainment and playing with the idea of belief and plausibility, and getting all those things hopefully right. So that to me is okay. You can only take responsibility for that central thing. You can't allow, because it's always going to be strange things on the outside. Now, having said that, I don't think it's easy. And every time I write a new show or a stage show, there's a lot of thought, particularly with the TV, because I don't do it so much now, but when there was a lot of the mind reading and things on TV. And it sort of grew over the years, really. But it's always, how is that going to work for this particular thing? There's not a simple formula. It's not as simple as going at the beginning, everything you're going to see is for entertainment. I use a mixture of skills, and then just do bad science for half an hour, because of course they're not going to remember that. It's not some magical thing that changes anything, and it shouldn't just be some get out of, well, I did say that at the beginning. It's like most mediums on TV will have something in the credits that roll past going, this is for entertainment purposes only. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make it okay, you know. So you work it out. I think it should be difficult, and it should be subtle with everything that you do. And as long as you're taking that seriously, then I think it's fine to go, all right, I'm going to take it seriously, I'm going to think about it a lot, but I can only take responsibility for the people in the middle that sort of get it. And I think after enough time of doing it, I think people do get it. I think my fan base, for want of a better word, get it and enjoy the sort of area of reality, non-reality that it kind of creates. And I'm very open about it. It's not like within the performance, I might kind of have certain license, but like outside of it,
this is my take from the outside. It's not like you're trying to set yourself up as a guru of this and engender a following.
No.
You're really trying to create an experience for people.
It's a type of theatre, so you have to, if you just sort of went, what I'm going to show you now is just if you just exposed a mechanical method of something that relied on that, then you're unlike a magic trick where that might still be interesting, possibly, perhaps a gambling trick, or even doing the cups and balls with transparent cups in a sort of Penn and Teller kind of way. That can still be amazing and mind-blowing. Mentalism doesn't always leave much of that. Sometimes it can do. A lot of the time it doesn't. So you are having to kind of, I always thought, the idea of suspending disbelief is not that interesting. If you watch Copperfield, I remember thinking this as a kid, if you watch Copperfield make the Statue of Liberty disappear, it's amazing. What a beautiful, stunning trick. You are probably, having said it, I was up all night wondering how he did it, but you don't probably, it doesn't, you're not, the laws of thermodynamics are not being challenged for you. You're probably not up thinking, well, if you can do that, what else can you do? And how, you get that it's a trick. There's a kind of, this is an illusion around it. And I just thought it was more interesting, surely, to engage belief and then play with that. So you go to a different sort of place, like the mediumship in the last show. I'd like to think that it's an interesting place that you're in as an audience member, watching somebody do it, hopefully better than mediums do. Hopefully, I'm not talking out of turn, but at the same time saying this is rubbish. I'm lying. I am lying to you while somebody's potentially crying, but also saying, no, it's okay, carry on. I know, but it's just an interesting place, and you can't get that if you on the one hand, throw it all away as tricks, or on the other hand, just say, no, I'm doing this for real, I'm talking to the dead. So I think it's interesting, but it's also subtle and complex, and what you do on stage is different from what you do on TV, which is different from what you do one-on-one.
Sure. It's a fascinating subject that I think you actually handle extremely well.
Thank you.
So I'm certainly not one of the detractors. And you said you've got a new show. This is a new stage show that's in the works? Is it
in the
about to
works,
go up?
Yeah. It's early days. I'll be so March 2015. So next year now is when that starts, and we're just beginning to get Andy and I and Andrew that writes the show. Let's just start to think about it now and what that show is going to be about, how it'll carry on from where the last one left off.
And based on past experience, it already has a title, yes?
Miracle, it's called, yeah.
So we can look for Miracle, but we're not really sure what's going to be in it yet?
Exactly, yeah. It's a strange place to be in, but people would say, oh, I've got my ticket, I'm sat in the front row. Are you? I have no idea what I'm going to say. I've been saving up for months. Good.
Are there any magic books that you might recommend, mentalism books that you might recommend to someone who's just getting started out, and especially ones that might have possibly been overlooked, if there's any obscure ones?
Honestly, it's probably been 10 years since I read a magic book, apart from David Berglass's The Berglass Effects. I thought it was terrific. And actually, that was the one thing that got me back into starting to play with cards again, was doing that. And ultimately led to a piece in the last stage show, although it ended up being a very different sort of thing, but the idea of the plot certainly came from that. So that's it really, but yeah, no, I don't. Also, it's difficult now because there's so many books, you know, it's very easy to self-publish now, so it's difficult unless you're really, you know, I'm not really involved in that magic world or mentalism world anymore. I don't really know who's who or who's doing what or who's publishing what, or let alone what things are available on the market, so I'd be the worst person to ask, and I just haven't read any for a very long time.
Well, Birdless Effects is a great recommendation for sure.
Yeah.
You know, because it does cover something that he used for.
And again, at its best, it's
60
about
years.
Yes, and it's about people. That it is as a prop, but the prop goes down. That's that, and now it's about us, and that to me is a really interesting area.
Yeah, absolutely. More than physically manipulating the cards, he was able to work with people in lots of different interesting ways.
Yeah.
And that actually brings us almost to the conclusion, because I didn't want to ask this question in with all the other ones, but I couldn't help but pick it out of the list of questions that we received.
Okay.
All right. This is it. One of our viewers would like you to think of a card. Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
And then this is their question.
Okay.
Is it the Four of Clubs?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Keep it going for Derren Brown. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Who was that viewer? That's what we need to know. Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
It's been such a great pleasure. Thank you to everybody who came out here. Of course, thank you, Derren Brown. It has been fantastic. And thank you for supporting Live Magic. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.